Have you ever noticed that you can speak English with confidence for the first 30 seconds, but then your mind suddenly goes blank, your words disappear, and the conversation becomes a struggle even though you know you have learned enough English to keep going? If that happens to you, the problem is not your vocabulary, your grammar, or your intelligence. The real problem is that your speaking stamina has never been trained. Just as a runner cannot finish a marathon without building endurance, you cannot speak English for several minutes without training your mind to stay in English when the conversation becomes more difficult. In this audiobook, you will learn how to strengthen your English mind, speak for longer without freezing, stop translating every thought, and build the confidence to keep every conversation flowing naturally. By the end of this journey, you will realize that fluency is not about knowing more English. It is about staying in English longer. Now, let's begin building the English-speaking stamina that will change the way you speak forever. Chapter 1. Your English is not weak, it gets tired. The biggest mistake English learners make is believing that they stop speaking because they do not know enough English, but in reality, what usually stops them is not a lack of vocabulary, grammar, or pronunciation, but the simple fact that their brain has never been trained to stay in English long enough to keep producing ideas naturally after the first few easy sentences have passed. And once you understand this difference, you will completely change the way you think about fluency. Think about what happens every time someone asks you a simple question in English. You answer confidently with sentences you have practiced hundreds of times, such as introducing yourself, talking about your job, describing your hobbies, or explaining where you live. And for a few moments you feel proud because your English sounds smooth, clear, and effortless. But then the conversation continues, a new question appears, the familiar sentences disappear, and suddenly your mind begins searching everywhere for the next idea while the silence grows longer and your confidence slowly fades away. Most learners immediately blame themselves during that moment because they think, "My English is terrible," or "I will never become fluent," when the truth is far more encouraging because your brain is experiencing something completely natural. It is simply becoming mentally tired after working continuously in a language that has not yet become fully automatic, and that mental fatigue is exactly what every learner experiences before they develop real speaking endurance. Imagine walking into a gym for the very first time and trying to lift heavy weights for an entire hour without stopping. You would quickly become exhausted, not because your body is incapable of becoming stronger, but because strength is something that grows through consistent training, repetition, and patience. Speaking English follows the same principle because every sentence your brain creates requires it to remember vocabulary, organize grammar, choose natural expressions, pronounce words correctly, and think about the next idea at the same time, which means your mind is performing an intense mental workout every second you continue speaking. This is why fluent speakers often appear relaxed while learners feel exhausted after only 1 minute of conversation, because fluency is not the absence of effort from the beginning but the result of thousands of moments in which the brain has learned to stay calm, stay focused, and continue producing English without giving up when the conversation becomes more challenging. The difference between you and a fluent speaker is not that they possess a magical talent you were never born with. The difference is that their English brain has been trained to keep working comfortably for much longer. Unfortunately, most learners spend years collecting more vocabulary, buying more grammar books, watching endless lessons, and searching for the perfect learning method, believing that one more resource will finally solve their problem, while they almost never train the one skill that transforms knowledge into fluency, the ability to keep speaking even when the perfect word does not immediately come to mind. Every time they stop speaking because they cannot remember one word, they accidentally teach their brain that silence is the correct response to difficulty instead of continuing with simpler words and keeping the conversation alive. One of the most powerful habits you can develop is giving yourself permission to continue speaking imperfectly instead of waiting for perfection. Fluent speakers do not always know the perfect word, but they know how to explain an idea using different words, simpler sentences, examples, or descriptions. And because they keep talking instead of stopping, their conversations continue flowing naturally, while learners often freeze, even though they understand much more English than they realize. From today forward, you must stop measuring your progress by asking yourself how many words you know or how many grammar rules you have memorized. Instead, ask yourself a much more important question: how long can I continue thinking and speaking in English before my brain gives up? That single question will reveal far more about your fluency than any vocabulary test ever could, because speaking is not a competition to know the most words. It is the ability to keep expressing your thoughts without allowing fear, hesitation, or mental fatigue to take control. As you continue through this audiobook, you will train your English mind exactly as an athlete trains the body, gradually increasing its endurance until speaking for 1 minute feels easy, then 3 minutes become comfortable, then 10 minutes become natural. And one day you will suddenly realize that the invisible wall which once stopped your English after 30 seconds has completely disappeared, not because you became a different person, but because you patiently built the speaking stamina that had been missing all along. So before you move to the next chapter, make one promise to yourself. Never confuse temporary mental tiredness with a lack of ability, because your English is not broken, your potential is not limited, and your dream of speaking fluently is not farther away than you think. Your English does not need another excuse to stop, it needs a stronger mind that knows how to keep going. Chapter 2. Stop translating every thought. Start thinking in English before you speak. One of the greatest reasons your English suddenly stops after 30 seconds is not because you have forgotten your vocabulary or because your grammar is weak, but because your brain is trying to perform two completely different jobs at the same time, and those two jobs constantly compete with each other until your mind becomes overloaded, your confidence begins to disappear, and the conversation slows down far more than it should. The first job is creating your ideas naturally, and the second is translating every one of those ideas from your native language into English before you allow yourself to speak. And while this process may seem harmless, it quietly steals your speed, your confidence, and your speaking stamina every single day. Imagine trying to drive a car while constantly looking in the rearview mirror instead of focusing on the road ahead. You would still move forward, but every decision would take longer, every turn would feel more difficult, and sooner or later you would become mentally exhausted because your attention is divided. That is exactly what happens when you translate every sentence before speaking. Your brain is never fully living inside English because it keeps traveling back to your native language for permission before every word can leave your mouth. This habit begins the very first day most people start learning English. They are taught that every English word has an equivalent word in their own language. Every sentence must first be understood through translation, and every conversation should begin with thinking in one language before changing it into another. At the beginning, this method feels useful because it helps you understand new vocabulary. But the problem appears when months become years and your brain never learns to let go of translation. Instead of using translation as temporary training wheels, many learners unknowingly make it their permanent way of speaking. Think about a child learning to ride a bicycle. Training wheels are incredibly helpful at the beginning because they provide balance and confidence. But if those wheels remain on the bicycle forever, the child never truly learns to ride freely. Translation works in exactly the same way. It is useful during the early stages of learning, but if you continue depending on it every time you speak, it eventually becomes the very thing preventing you from becoming fluent. This is why you often understand English much faster than you can speak it. When someone speaks to you, your brain only has to recognize meaning, but when you speak, your brain must first create an idea, translate it, organize grammar, choose vocabulary, check pronunciation, and finally say it aloud, all within a few seconds. It is not surprising that your mind becomes tired after only 30 seconds because you are asking it to perform far more work than a fluent speaker's brain has to perform. A fluent speaker does not spend every second asking, "How do I say this in English?" Instead, they begin asking a much simpler question, "How can I express this idea?" That small difference changes everything because communication is about expressing meaning, not about producing perfect translations. The moment you stop chasing the perfect sentence and start looking for the simplest way to communicate your idea, your English immediately becomes faster, smoother, and far more natural. Many learners become trapped because they believe every sentence has only one correct version. They search for the perfect vocabulary, the perfect grammar structure, and the perfect pronunciation before they allow themselves to speak. But while they are searching for perfection, the conversation has already moved on. Fluent speakers understand something much more valuable. There are always many different ways to communicate the same message. If one word does not come to mind, they simply choose another. If one sentence feels difficult, they build an easier one. Their goal is not perfection, it is communication. Imagine someone asks you to describe your hometown, but you suddenly forget the word peaceful. Many learners would stop speaking immediately because they cannot remember that single word. A fluent thinker does something completely different. They might say it is very quiet, or there is not much noise, or people live a calm life there. The exact word was missing, but the conversation never stopped because the idea continued moving forward. This is one of the greatest secrets behind fluent communication. Fluency is not knowing every word, it is knowing how to keep expressing yourself when you do not. From today, begin training your brain in a new way. Instead of translating long and complicated thoughts from your native language, deliberately create smaller thoughts directly in English. When you wake up in the morning, instead of thinking in your own language, quietly tell yourself simple English sentences such as, "I need to make breakfast," "The weather looks nice today," "I have a busy afternoon," or "I should finish my work before dinner." These sentences may seem too simple to matter, but they are teaching your brain something far more important than grammar. They are teaching it to live inside English without constantly asking another language for permission. As your confidence grows, gradually increase the difficulty of your thoughts. Describe what you see around you. Explain what you are doing while you do it. Tell yourself short stories about your day. Predict what will happen tomorrow. Imagine conversations with people you admire. Give opinions about books, movies, news, or your future goals. The more often your brain experiences English as a language for thinking instead of translating, the stronger your speaking stamina becomes because your mind is finally learning to move directly from thought to speech. There will be moments when you still feel tempted to return to translation because it feels familiar and safe. That is completely normal. Your brain always prefers old habits because they require less effort in the beginning. But remember this truth: every time you resist the habit of translating and allow yourself to think directly in English, even if your sentences are simple, you are building a stronger English mind. Every small victory is another step toward effortless fluency. Never be ashamed of speaking with easy vocabulary. Simple English spoken confidently is infinitely more powerful than advanced English trapped inside your head. The purpose of language is not to impress people with difficult words, it is to connect with people through clear ideas. The more often you choose communication over perfection, the more naturally your English begins to flow. As you continue this journey, you will discover that your greatest breakthrough will not happen when you memorize another 1,000 words or complete another grammar book. It will happen on the day your mind quietly stops translating every sentence and begins thinking naturally in English without fear, without hesitation, and without asking permission from another language first. That is the day your conversations become longer, your confidence becomes stronger, and your English finally begins to feel like a language you truly own instead of one you are constantly borrowing. Chapter 3. Your brain doesn't need more English, it needs faster access. If someone asked you to write down every English word you know, you would probably surprise yourself with how much you have already learned over the years. You have spent hundreds, perhaps even thousands of hours studying grammar, memorizing vocabulary, watching English videos, listening to podcasts, completing exercises, and reading articles. So the truth is that your English brain already contains far more knowledge than you use during a normal conversation. The real challenge is not that the knowledge is missing. The real challenge is that your brain cannot find it quickly enough when another person is waiting for you to speak. This is one of the greatest differences between knowing English and being able to use English. Knowledge stored inside your memory is valuable, but fluency depends on how quickly that knowledge becomes available when you need it. Imagine owning a library with 10,000 books but having no system to find the right one. Every answer you need is somewhere inside that library, yet if it takes 5 minutes to locate the correct book every time someone asks a question, the knowledge becomes almost useless during a real conversation. That is exactly how many learners experience English. Their vocabulary exists, but it is buried so deeply that they cannot reach it before the moment has already passed. Think about your own name for a moment. Nobody asks you to remember your name. Nobody watches you pause for several seconds before introducing yourself. Your name appears instantly because your brain has retrieved it thousands of times throughout your life until it became automatic. Now compare that with an English word you learned 6 months ago but have only used once or twice. The word is still somewhere in your memory, but because your brain has rarely visited it, finding it feels slow and difficult. This is not a memory problem, it is an access problem. Many learners respond to this frustration by trying to learn even more vocabulary. Every week they download another word list, buy another textbook, or save another collection of advanced expressions, believing that one more 1,000 words will finally make them fluent. Unfortunately, the opposite often happens. Their knowledge grows larger, but their speaking becomes slower because they are constantly adding new information without strengthening access to the information they already have. Imagine filling your computer with thousands of files while never organizing them into folders. Eventually, finding one document becomes harder even though the computer contains everything you need. Your English mind works in a similar way. Fluency does not come from collecting endless information. It comes from making your most useful English available instantly. This is why the most fluent speakers often use surprisingly simple vocabulary. Listen carefully to successful public speakers, experienced teachers, or confident communicators, and you will notice something interesting. They do not spend every sentence searching for impressive words. Instead, they use familiar words with incredible speed, confidence, and flexibility. Their strength comes from automatic access rather than complicated vocabulary. Many learners mistakenly believe that advanced English always means difficult English. They become obsessed with learning rare expressions because they think those words will make them sound fluent. In reality, fluency is usually built on the fastest possible access to common words. The words think, feel, want, believe, change, help, become, understand, and remember appear in conversations far more often than complicated academic vocabulary. If these everyday words become automatic, your conversations become automatic. Consider how children learn their first language. They do not begin with thousands of sophisticated words. They begin with a very small collection of useful vocabulary that they repeat every single day until those words become effortless. Because they use those words constantly, their brains build powerful neural pathways that allow instant retrieval. As adults learning English, many people try to skip this stage. They chase complexity before mastering automaticity, and as a result, their conversations become slower instead of smoother. Another hidden problem is that many learners study English only with their eyes. They read vocabulary lists, they highlight textbooks, they underline grammar rules, they watch explanations, but speaking fluency is not built primarily through recognition. It is built through retrieval. There is an enormous difference between recognizing a word when you see it and producing that same word immediately when someone asks you a question. Recognition is passive, retrieval is active. Fluency is built through active retrieval repeated thousands of times. Think of your brain as a busy city filled with millions of roads. Every time you actively retrieve an English word during speaking, another car travels down that road, making the path wider, smoother, and easier to follow. If a road is rarely used, grass begins to grow, the path becomes narrow, and traveling along it becomes slow. The English words you use every day become wide highways. The words you only memorize become forgotten side streets hidden beneath weeds. Your goal is not simply to build a bigger city. Your goal is to strengthen the roads that matter most. One of the simplest ways to improve retrieval speed is to practice answering the same question in different ways. If someone asks, "What did you do yesterday?" do not answer it once and move on. Answer it 5 different times. Change the details, change the vocabulary, change the structure. Every variation teaches your brain another route to the same destination, making future conversations much faster and more flexible. You should also begin practicing something called rapid response training. Choose ordinary questions such as, "What is your favorite food? What are your future goals? Why are you learning English?" or describe your morning routine. Then challenge yourself to begin answering within 2 seconds. Do not wait for the perfect sentence. Speak immediately with the simplest words available. The purpose of this exercise is not perfect grammar. The purpose is teaching your brain that speed matters more than perfection during real communication. At first, your answers may feel simple and repetitive. That is completely normal. Speed develops before sophistication. A pianist first learns to play smoothly before performing complex music. A driver first learns to control the car before driving at high speed. An athlete first builds balance before building power. English fluency follows exactly the same pattern. Automatic access comes before advanced expression. You must also stop being afraid of using the same words repeatedly while you are training. Many learners criticize themselves every time they repeat familiar vocabulary, believing they should always sound more advanced. But repetition is not a sign of weakness during practice. It is the very process through which automaticity is created. Every time you retrieve a useful word quickly, you strengthen its connection inside your brain. Eventually, those connections become so strong that the words appear without conscious effort. As your retrieval speed improves, something remarkable begins to happen. Conversations no longer feel like memory tests. Instead of desperately searching for every word, your ideas begin arriving naturally because your brain has learned where everything is stored and how to access it immediately. The pauses become shorter, your confidence becomes stronger, your attention shifts away from remembering English and toward expressing your personality, your opinions, and your experiences. That is the moment when speaking becomes enjoyable rather than exhausting. You stop feeling like someone taking an exam every time you open your mouth, and you begin feeling like someone simply sharing thoughts with another human being. This transformation does not happen because you suddenly learn thousands of new words overnight. It happens because your brain finally learned to unlock the English it had been storing all along. Never forget this truth as you continue your journey. Your greatest obstacle is rarely the amount of English you know. More often, it is the speed with which your mind can reach the English you already possess. Build that speed patiently, strengthen it every day, and one conversation at a time you will discover that the words you once struggled to find have been waiting inside you all along, ready to appear the moment you truly need them. Chapter 4. The 1-minute, 3-minute, and 10-minute speaking method. Most English learners try to improve fluency in a way that is too difficult, too random, and too exhausting for the brain because they expect themselves to speak naturally for 10 or 15 minutes even though they have never learned how to remain comfortable for one complete minute. And when they fail to reach that unrealistic goal, they immediately assume that their English is weak instead of recognizing that speaking stamina must be developed through small, controlled, and carefully increased stages. No athlete begins training by running the longest distance possible on the first day because the body becomes stronger only when the challenge is slightly greater than its current ability, and your English brain follows the same principle. If you can currently speak for 30 seconds before your mind becomes empty, your next goal should not be 30 minutes. Your next goal should be 45 seconds, then 1 minute, then 90 seconds, because fluency grows when your mind learns to remain calm just beyond the point where it normally wants to stop. This is the purpose of the 1-minute, 3-minute, and 10-minute speaking method. A simple system designed to transform short, nervous answers into longer, clearer, and more confident communication by teaching your brain how to expand one small idea into a complete flow of English without depending on memorized speeches or advanced vocabulary. The first stage is the 1-minute level, and although 1 minute may sound easy, it can feel surprisingly long when you are speaking alone without stopping because after your first few sentences, your brain usually begins searching for new ideas, your familiar vocabulary becomes less available, and the temptation to become silent grows stronger. This is exactly why the 1-minute level is so important, because it introduces your mind to the first real experience of sustained English. Choose a simple topic that already belongs to your life, such as your morning routine, your favorite food, your hometown, your family, your work, your studies, or something you did yesterday, and then begin speaking without preparing every sentence in advance. Your goal is not to sound impressive, use advanced grammar, or avoid every mistake. Your only goal is to keep the language moving for 1 complete minute, even when your ideas feel ordinary or your sentences sound simple. At the beginning, you may say, I wake up at 7 o'clock, then I wash my face, after that I make breakfast, and usually I drink tea. And within 20 seconds, you may feel that you have nothing more to say, but instead of stopping, you must learn how to expand the same idea by adding reasons, details, examples, feelings, comparisons, and small stories. You might continue by explaining why you wake up at that time, what kind of breakfast you prefer, how your morning routine changes on weekends, or how you feel when you wake up late, and suddenly one small topic becomes large enough to support a full minute of speaking. This ability to expand an idea is one of the most important skills in fluency, because real conversations are rarely built from completely new ideas appearing every second. They are usually built by developing one idea more deeply. A fluent speaker does not constantly search for a new topic. They remain with the same topic and continue exploring it from different directions, which allows the conversation to feel natural and connected. One powerful way to expand any idea is to use 5 simple directions: what, why, when, how, and example. If your topic is learning English, first explain what you are learning, then explain why it matters to you, when you usually practice, how you study, and finally give an example of a recent success or difficulty. These 5 directions can turn one short answer into a complete and meaningful explanation without requiring difficult vocabulary. When you practice the 1-minute level, do not stop the timer every time you make a mistake, forget a word, or lose your sentence, because those uncomfortable moments are the exact moments in which speaking stamina is built. If you forget a word, describe it. If your sentence becomes confusing, begin again with simpler language. If your idea disappears, repeat the last point in a different way. Every time you continue instead of stopping, you teach your brain that difficulty does not have to end communication. After 1 minute begins to feel manageable, you move to the 3-minute level, where the challenge is no longer simply keeping your mouth moving, but learning how to organize your thoughts so the listener can follow them easily. 3 minutes require structure, because random sentences quickly become tiring and difficult to continue, while organized ideas create a clear path that your brain can follow without becoming lost. At the 3-minute level, divide your topic into 3 parts: beginning, development, and conclusion. In the beginning, introduce the topic and explain why you are speaking about it. In the development, share 2 or 3 important details, experiences, or opinions. In the conclusion, summarize your main point and explain what you learned, what you believe, or what you plan to do next. For example, if your topic is why I want to speak English fluently, you might begin by explaining when you first became interested in English and why fluency matters to your future. Then you could develop the topic by describing the opportunities English may create, the difficulties you currently experience, and the changes you are making in your daily practice. Finally, you could conclude by explaining your long-term goal and reminding yourself that progress will come through consistency. This structure gives your brain direction, and direction saves energy. When you know where your explanation is going, you do not have to invent a completely new path after every sentence. You simply move from one part to the next, and this makes longer speaking feel far less overwhelming. The 3-minute level also teaches you how to use connection words, because longer speaking becomes smoother when your ideas are joined clearly. Words and expressions such as "first of all," "another reason," for example, "because of this," "on the other hand," "in my experience," and "finally," act like bridges between thoughts, allowing your speech to continue without sudden breaks. Many learners know these expressions but rarely use them actively, which is why their speech often sounds like a collection of separate sentences rather than one connected explanation. When you deliberately include these bridges during practice, your English begins to sound more organized, more natural, and more confident, even if the vocabulary remains simple. At this level, you must also learn to stay with one idea longer instead of abandoning it too quickly. If you say, "Learning English is important for my career," do not immediately jump to a completely different subject. Explain what kind of career you want, how English may help you, what situations may require English, and what could change in your life if your speaking improves. One strong idea fully developed is more powerful than 10 weak ideas mentioned without explanation. Once you can speak for 3 minutes with a clear structure, you are ready for the 10-minute level. But 10 minutes should not be treated as one enormous block of speech. It should be seen as several smaller sections connected together, because even fluent speakers organize long explanations into parts instead of producing endless sentences without direction. To speak for 10 minutes, choose a broad topic and divide it into 4 or 5 smaller sections before you begin. If your topic is My English Learning Journey, your sections might include how you started, the methods you used, the mistakes you made, the improvements you noticed, and the goals you have for the future. Each section can last about 2 minutes, making the entire task feel manageable rather than frightening. This is one of the most important mental shifts you can make, because the brain becomes anxious when it sees 10 minutes as one impossible challenge, but it becomes calmer when it sees 5 small sections that each have a clear purpose. You are not speaking for 10 minutes at once. You are simply completing one small section, then another, until the full practice is finished. The 10-minute level also requires variation, because repeating the same sentence pattern for too long makes speaking feel heavy and unnatural. You can create variation by moving between description, opinion, explanation, comparison, storytelling, and reflection. You might describe what happened, explain why it mattered, compare it with another experience, share how you felt, and then reflect on what you learned. For example, when speaking about a difficult English conversation, you could first describe where it happened and who was involved, then explain why you felt nervous, compare that experience with an earlier conversation, tell the story of the moment your mind went blank, and finally reflect on what you would do differently next time. One experience can support many minutes of speaking when you learn how to explore it from several angles. At this stage, pauses become extremely important, because speaking stamina does not mean talking quickly without breathing. It means staying mentally present in English for a longer period. A short pause can help you organize your thoughts, choose a simpler sentence, and continue with greater control. Silence becomes a problem only when fear takes over and stops the conversation completely, but a calm pause used to prepare the next idea is a natural part of confident communication. You must also stop believing that long speaking requires perfect grammar, because trying to monitor every grammatical detail while speaking for 10 minutes will exhaust your brain and destroy your flow. During stamina practice, your first priority is continuity, your second priority is clarity, and only after the exercise should you review repeated mistakes. This order allows fluency to grow without ignoring accuracy. A useful method is to record your practice, listen to it once, and identify only one area to improve. Perhaps you repeat the same word too often, pause for too long, or struggle to connect ideas. Choose one small improvement for the next session instead of criticizing every sentence, because focused correction builds confidence while constant self-judgment destroys it. You should never compare your first 10-minute attempt with the speech of a native speaker, a professional teacher, or someone who has practiced for years, because such comparisons ignore the process that created their fluency. Compare your performance only with your earlier performance. If you spoke for 2 minutes last week and 4 minutes today, you are becoming stronger. If your pauses are shorter, your ideas are clearer, or you recover more quickly after forgetting a word, your speaking stamina is growing. The most powerful part of this method is consistency. Practicing for 10 minutes once a month will not transform your English, but practicing 1 minute every day can begin changing the way your brain works. Small, regular challenges teach your mind that English is not an emergency. It is simply a language you use every day. Begin with 1 minute on a familiar topic and repeat the exercise until your mind feels less pressure. Then increase to 3 minutes and practice organizing your thoughts. When 3 minutes becomes comfortable, begin working toward 10 minutes by dividing larger topics into smaller sections. Do not rush from one stage to the next simply because you want faster results, because each stage builds the foundation for the one that follows. As you continue practicing, you will notice that the 30-second wall no longer feels as powerful as it once did. Your brain will stop panicking when the easy sentences are finished, because it will know how to add details, give examples, explain reasons, tell stories, and move from one idea to another without becoming silent. Eventually, 1 minute will feel too short, 3 minutes will feel comfortable, and 10 minutes will no longer seem impossible, because you will not be depending on memorized language or waiting for perfect sentences. You will be using a system that teaches your mind how to remain in English, develop ideas, recover from difficulty, and keep moving forward with confidence. Remember that every minute you continue speaking after your mind wants to stop is not just practice, it is evidence that your old limit is becoming weaker. You are training your brain to understand that English does not end when the first answer is finished, when one word is forgotten, or when a mistake appears. English continues as long as you are willing to search for another way to express the idea. Your goal is not to speak for 10 minutes perfectly. Your goal is to become the kind of person who does not surrender after 30 seconds, because once you develop the courage and stamina to continue, fluency stops being a distant dream and begins becoming a daily habit. Chapter 5. The daily speaking workout that makes English automatic. The reason many English learners remain stuck for years is not that they lack motivation, intelligence, or access to good learning materials, but that their speaking practice is too irregular, too passive, and too dependent on waiting for the perfect moment. Because they may watch English videos every day, collect vocabulary, read grammar explanations, and understand more than they did before, yet they rarely place themselves inside the kind of continuous speaking practice that forces the brain to retrieve words, connect ideas, recover from mistakes, and keep communicating when the first easy sentences have already disappeared. You cannot build speaking stamina by studying English only when you feel inspired, just as you cannot build physical strength by exercising once every few weeks and expecting your body to remember the progress forever, because fluency is created through repeated contact with the language until speaking stops feeling like a special performance and begins feeling like a normal part of your day. Your brain becomes automatic through frequency, not intensity alone, which means a focused 15-minute speaking workout completed every day can transform your fluency far more deeply than one exhausting 2-hour session completed only when motivation happens to appear. The most important thing to understand is that your daily speaking workout does not need to be complicated, expensive, or dependent on another person, because you do not need to wait for a teacher, a language partner, a classroom, or a perfect environment before you begin building real fluency. You already possess the most important training tools: your voice, your thoughts, your daily experiences, your phone recorder, and a willingness to continue speaking even when the words do not arrive as quickly as you want them to. The daily speaking workout begins with a simple principle. Every practice session must train production, not only understanding. Listening and reading are valuable because they give your brain new language. But speaking is the moment when your brain must actively open its memory, choose words, build sentences, arrange ideas, and send everything through your mouth in real time. If you spend 90% of your study time receiving English and only 10% producing it, you should not be surprised when your understanding grows faster than your speaking ability, because the skill you practice most will always become the skill that feels easiest. Your workout should begin with a short warm-up that removes the pressure of speaking perfectly, because many learners waste the first several minutes judging their pronunciation, correcting every sentence, or waiting for an impressive idea, and by doing this they create tension before the real practice has even started. A speaking warm-up should be simple, familiar, and fast, allowing your brain to enter English without feeling that it is being tested. Begin by describing what is happening around you in complete but easy sentences. You might say that the room is quiet, the weather is warm, you have several tasks to complete, your phone is beside you, or you are feeling slightly tired but ready to practice. The subject does not matter, because the purpose is simply to wake up the English inside your mind and show your brain that it can begin speaking immediately without first translating a complicated thought. During this warm-up, continue for 2 full minutes and refuse to stop simply because the ideas seem ordinary, because ordinary language is exactly where automatic fluency begins. You do not need extraordinary topics to build speaking strength, because your ability to describe simple experiences clearly and continuously will later support your ability to discuss more difficult subjects with confidence. After the warm-up, move into rapid sentence expansion, which teaches your brain how to take one small statement and develop it into a longer explanation. Choose a simple sentence such as, "I enjoy learning English," and then expand it by adding a reason, an example, a personal experience, a comparison, and a future intention. You might explain why English matters to you, describe a moment when it helped you, compare your current level with your past ability, and explain what you hope to achieve next year. This exercise is powerful because many learners do not truly run out of English. They run out of directions for developing an idea. They produce one sentence, believe the topic is finished, and then become silent, even though the same idea could easily support several more minutes if they knew how to explore it through detail, reason, example, contrast, result, and reflection. Sentence expansion trains you to recognize that every idea contains many smaller ideas waiting to be expressed. After several minutes of expansion practice, move into the 3-question drill, where you choose one topic and answer 3 connected questions without preparing your answers in writing. If your topic is work, you might ask yourself what you do, what challenges you face, and what you want to improve. If your topic is travel, you might ask where you would like to go, why that place interests you, and what you would do there. If your topic is English learning, you might ask what your greatest difficulty is, what method has helped you most, and what your next goal will be. The value of this drill is that it teaches your brain to remain inside one subject while moving naturally between related ideas, which is exactly what happens during real conversations. People rarely ask one question and then end the discussion. They ask follow-up questions, request examples, challenge your opinion, or invite you to explain further, so your practice must prepare you to continue after the first answer instead of treating every question as an isolated task. As you answer, begin immediately and allow yourself no more than 2 seconds of silence before speaking, because waiting too long teaches your brain that every response requires perfect preparation. Real fluency grows when you learn to enter an answer with a simple beginning and discover the rest of the sentence while you are already speaking. You may not know exactly how your explanation will end, but that uncertainty is part of natural communication. The next stage of your workout is retelling, one of the most effective methods for turning passive knowledge into active speaking ability. Listen to a short English story, watch a short video, or read a brief article, and then close the material and explain the main ideas in your own words without trying to copy the original sentences. Your goal is not perfect memory, but active reconstruction, because reconstruction forces your brain to find its own vocabulary, organize information, and communicate meaning without depending on the exact language someone else used. At first, your retelling may be shorter and simpler than the original, and that is completely acceptable because the purpose is not imitation but ownership. When you can take an idea you heard from someone else and explain it naturally in your own English, you are no longer simply recognizing language, you are learning how to control it. A powerful variation is to retell the same story 3 times. During the first retelling, focus only on communicating the main idea. During the second, add more details, clearer connections, and better examples. During the third, speak more naturally and confidently while trying to reduce unnecessary pauses. Each repetition allows your brain to move from basic survival to stronger organization and finally towards smoother delivery. Many learners avoid repetition because they believe speaking about the same topic again is boring or unproductive, but repetition is one of the fastest ways to make language automatic. The first attempt reveals what you cannot access quickly. The second strengthens the vocabulary and structure you needed. The third begins turning those patterns into natural speech. You are not repeating because you failed. You are repeating because automatic fluency is built through multiple successful contacts with the same language. After retelling, begin the recovery drill, which trains you for the exact moment your mind goes blank. Choose a topic and speak continuously, but every time you forget a word or lose an idea, do not stop the recording. Instead, use recovery phrases that give your brain time while keeping the conversation alive. You can say, "Let me explain that in another way. What I am trying to say is, I cannot remember the exact word, but it means, another way to describe it is, or the main point is that." These phrases are not signs of weak English. They are tools of strong communication, because even fluent speakers use them when organizing thoughts, correcting themselves, or searching for a better explanation. The difference is that confident speakers do not interpret a forgotten word as the end of the conversation. They create a bridge around the difficulty and continue moving. During the recovery drill, deliberately choose one or two difficult ideas that may force you to search for language, because speaking stamina grows when you practice continuing under pressure rather than avoiding every uncomfortable moment. If you always choose only the easiest topics, your confidence may increase, but your flexibility will remain limited. You need a balance between familiar subjects that build flow and challenging subjects that teach recovery. The next stage is the story building workout, because storytelling is one of the strongest ways to develop longer speech. A story naturally gives your brain a beginning, a middle, and an ending, which reduces the fear of not knowing what to say next. Choose a real event from your life, such as a difficult day, an embarrassing mistake, a successful moment, a journey, a conversation, or a lesson you learned, and then tell it with enough detail that the listener can imagine what happened. Do not simply report the event by saying, "I went somewhere, something happened, and then I came home." Describe where you were, who was present, what you expected, what suddenly changed, how you felt, what decision you made, and what happened afterward. The more sensory detail, emotion, and reflection you include, the longer and more engaging your speaking becomes. Storytelling also teaches time control, because you must move between past actions, background information, present reflection, and future lessons. This makes it one of the most complete speaking exercises available, as it trains grammar, vocabulary, organization, emotion, and continuity at the same time without requiring you to study these areas separately. After storytelling, complete an opinion workout where you choose a simple question and speak for 3 to 5 minutes while supporting your position. You might discuss whether technology improves life, whether children should learn English early, whether working from home is better than working in an office, or whether failure is necessary for success. Your topic does not need to be controversial, but it should require you to explain why you believe something rather than simply describe facts. Begin with your main opinion, then give at least 2 reasons, 1 example, 1 possible opposing view, and a conclusion. This structure develops the ability to speak with direction and depth, which becomes especially useful in interviews, meetings, examinations, presentations, and serious conversations where short answers are not enough. When you practice opinions, avoid memorizing complete speeches because memorization can create the illusion of fluency without developing flexibility. You may write 5 key words to remind yourself of the main points, but the sentences should be created while you speak, because your goal is to train real-time communication rather than recitation. The final speaking stage of the daily workout is free speaking, where you choose any subject and speak without notes for several minutes. This is where all the earlier exercises come together, because you must retrieve vocabulary, expand ideas, connect points, recover from difficulty, organize your speech, and maintain momentum without depending on a fixed structure. Free speaking can feel uncomfortable at first because there is nothing protecting you from silence, but that discomfort is valuable. It reveals the true condition of your speaking stamina and gives you a clear place to measure progress. Record the exact length of time you speak before becoming completely unable to continue, and then try to improve that time gradually over the following days. After the speaking session ends, you must review intelligently, because practice without reflection can strengthen both good and bad habits. However, review should not become an opportunity to attack yourself, count every mistake, or destroy the confidence you just built. Listen to the recording with the mindset of a coach, not a critic. Choose only 3 things to notice: 1 strength, 1 repeated difficulty, and 1 specific goal for tomorrow. Your strength might be that you continued despite forgetting a word. Your difficulty might be repeating the same connector too often, and your goal might be using 3 different phrases to introduce examples during the next session. This simple review gives direction without overwhelming your mind. Do not try to correct every grammar error immediately, because if you turn every practice session into a long investigation of mistakes, you will begin associating speaking with punishment. Instead, notice repeated patterns that genuinely interfere with clarity and work on them one at a time. Progress becomes faster when your attention is focused. A complete daily workout might include 2 minutes of warm-up description, 3 minutes of sentence expansion, 5 minutes of question practice, 5 minutes of retelling, 3 minutes of recovery training, 5 minutes of storytelling or opinion speaking, and several minutes of review. The exact timing can change according to your schedule, but the important thing is that every session contains active speaking and gradual challenge. On busy days, complete a shorter version rather than skipping practice completely. Speak for 1 minute about your morning, answer 1 question for 2 minutes, retell 1 short idea, and record 1 final free speaking attempt. Even 5 focused minutes protect the habit and remind your brain that English speaking belongs inside your everyday life. The greatest danger is waiting until you feel ready, because readiness usually arrives after action, not before it. You may begin tired, uncertain, or unmotivated, but after the first minute, your mind often becomes more active and your confidence begins returning. The purpose of a daily routine is to remove the need for emotional permission. You practice because it is part of the day, not because every day feels perfect. There will be days when your English feels smooth and powerful, and there will be days when familiar words disappear, your pronunciation feels uncomfortable, and your sentences seem weaker than yesterday. Do not allow one difficult session to convince you that you are losing progress, because performance naturally changes according to sleep, stress, energy, and attention, while true improvement is measured across weeks and months rather than one recording. Consistency does not mean perfection. It means returning after weak days, continuing after mistakes, and keeping your relationship with English alive even when progress feels invisible. Many of the most important changes in the brain happen quietly, long before you can hear them clearly in your speech. You should also build speaking triggers into your normal routine, so English practice no longer depends entirely on a formal study session. Speak while preparing breakfast, describe your plans while getting dressed, summarize your day while walking, explain a problem while doing simple work, or share your thoughts aloud before sleeping. These small moments can create dozens of extra minutes of speaking every week without requiring additional study time. Another powerful habit is changing the language of your inner voice during ordinary activities. When you make a decision, explain the reason in English. When you feel frustrated, describe the feeling in English. When you complete a task, summarize what happened in English. When you plan tomorrow, organize the plan in English. The more often English becomes the language of your real life, the less foreign it feels when you speak to another person. Your environment can also help you create consistency. Keep a visible list of speaking topics, place your recording application where you can open it quickly, and prepare a small collection of questions before the week begins. The easier it is to start, the less energy you waste deciding what to practice. You may also create a 7-day rotation so every day has a different focus. One day can be personal description, another can be storytelling, another can be opinion speaking, another can be retelling, another can be interview questions, another can be problem solving, and the final day can be a longer speaking challenge that combines everything you practiced. Variety keeps the routine interesting, while repetition keeps the important skills strong. As your stamina grows, increase difficulty carefully. Speak for slightly longer periods, choose less familiar topics, reduce preparation time, explain more complex ideas, or repeat the exercise with greater clarity. Do not increase every difficulty at once, because the goal is to challenge your brain without creating so much pressure that the practice becomes impossible. You should also remember that faster speaking is not automatically better speaking. Your first goal is not speed, but continuous control. Speak at a pace that allows you to think, breathe, and connect your ideas. As automaticity increases, speed will develop naturally because your brain will spend less time searching for basic language. The daily workout eventually creates a powerful transformation that may feel almost invisible at first. You will notice that common words appear more quickly, your sentences begin connecting themselves, and mistakes no longer destroy your concentration. You will recover from pauses without panic, explain forgotten words without embarrassment, and continue speaking even when the subject changes unexpectedly. Then one day you will enter a real conversation and realize that you are no longer counting seconds. You will answer the first question, develop the idea, respond to a follow-up, add an example, ask your own question, and continue communicating without constantly checking whether your English is about to disappear. The language will still require attention, but it will no longer feel like a fragile object that can break after one mistake. That moment will not be created by one perfect lesson, one advanced grammar rule, or one magical vocabulary list. It will be created by all the ordinary days when you opened your mouth and practiced even though nobody was listening, when you continued after forgetting a word, when you repeated the same story until it became smoother, and when you trained for one more minute after your mind wanted to stop. Automatic English is not English without effort. It is English shaped by so much consistent effort that the effort becomes lighter, faster, and less visible. Every daily workout gives your brain another reason to trust the language, another pathway to retrieve it, and another experience of continuing instead of freezing. From this day forward, stop asking whether you feel ready to speak and begin asking whether you completed your speaking workout, because confidence does not arrive before practice as a gift. Confidence grows after practice as evidence. Every session becomes proof that you can begin, continue, recover, and finish in English. Your English-speaking stamina will not be built in one dramatic moment, but it can be built through one disciplined routine repeated until the words that once felt distant begin appearing naturally, the pauses that once frightened you become calm spaces for thought, and the 30-second limit that once controlled your voice becomes nothing more than an old memory of the learner you used to be. Chapter 6. How Fluent Speakers Keep Talking When Their Mind Goes Blank. The moment your mind goes blank during English speaking can feel far more frightening than it actually is, because what begins as one forgotten word can quickly become a wave of panic that affects your memory, your breathing, your pronunciation, and your confidence all at once, until a small and completely normal difficulty begins feeling like undeniable proof that you are not fluent enough to continue. You may know exactly what you want to communicate, but the English expression refuses to appear, the other person is waiting, the silence feels longer with every second, and instead of calmly searching for another way to express the idea, your mind becomes occupied with thoughts such as, why can't I remember this word? What will this person think about me? Or, my English is failing again. And once your attention moves away from communication and toward fear, even the simple English you normally use comfortably can suddenly become difficult to access. This experience creates one of the greatest misunderstandings in language learning, because learners often believe that fluent speakers never forget words, never lose ideas, never make confusing sentences, and never experience uncomfortable silence, while the truth is that fluent speakers face these moments regularly even in their first language. They forget names, lose their direction, begin a sentence and change it halfway through, struggle to remember a specific expression, or realize that the idea in their mind is too complicated to communicate clearly, but instead of treating that difficulty as the end of speaking, they use a collection of habits that protects the flow of the conversation while giving their brain enough time to recover. Real fluency is not the ability to speak without ever becoming stuck, because no human being communicates with perfect control at every moment. Real fluency is the ability to remain calm when you become stuck, maintain connection with the listener, and continue expressing the meaning through another path. The learner believes there is only one road toward the sentence and becomes silent when that road is blocked, while the fluent communicator understands that every idea can be reached through many roads, and when one expression disappears, another explanation can still carry the conversation forward. Imagine you are traveling toward an important destination when you discover that the main road has been closed. An inexperienced traveler may stop completely and believe the journey is over, while an experienced driver looks for another route, follows a smaller road, asks for directions, or temporarily changes the path without forgetting the destination. Forgetting an English word is simply a closed road, not the end of the journey, and your speaking stamina becomes stronger when you learn how to keep traveling toward the meaning rather than standing silently in front of one missing expression. The first difference between a fluent speaker and a nervous learner appears in the way each person interprets difficulty. When a learner forgets a word, the mind often produces a dangerous conclusion such as, I do not know English. But when a fluent speaker forgets a word, the mind produces a practical question such as, how else can I explain this? The event is exactly the same, yet the interpretation changes the result completely. One interpretation creates fear and silence, while the other creates flexibility and continued communication. You must therefore begin separating a missing word from your entire identity as an English speaker, because forgetting one expression does not mean your vocabulary has disappeared, your progress has been lost, or your fluency is false. It simply means that one piece of language was temporarily unavailable at one moment, which happens to every speaker in every language. When you stop turning ordinary difficulties into personal failures, your brain remains calmer, and a calm brain can retrieve language far more effectively than a frightened brain. Fear creates mental pressure, and mental pressure makes access to language more difficult, which means the harder you force yourself to remember a word, the further away that word may seem to move. You may have experienced this when a familiar name disappeared from your memory and returned only after you stopped trying so hard to remember it. English vocabulary often behaves in the same way. When you attack your memory with frustration, you create more tension, but when you continue speaking through simpler language, the missing word may suddenly return naturally a few seconds later. This is why fluent speakers rarely fight one forgotten word for too long. They do not allow the entire conversation to wait while they search through their memory for the perfect expression, because they understand that communication is more important than linguistic perfection. They move around the missing word, continue developing the idea, and often discover that the exact vocabulary was not even necessary to make the listener understand. One of the most powerful skills you can develop is circumlocution, which simply means explaining a word or idea by using other words when the exact expression is unavailable. Although the term may sound advanced, you already use this skill naturally in your first language whenever you say something such as, "It is the tool people use for opening bottles," or "It is the person who repairs water pipes," because you cannot immediately remember the exact name. Instead of becoming silent, you describe the function, appearance, location, purpose, category, or effect until the listener understands what you mean. If you forget the English word umbrella, you can say, "It is the thing we carry when it rains." If you forget pharmacist, you can say, "It is the person who prepares and gives medicine in a pharmacy." If you forget exhausted, you can say, "I was extremely tired and had no energy left." If you forget generous, you can say, "She is the kind of person who enjoys giving and helping others." In every example, the missing vocabulary does not destroy the meaning because you replace one unavailable word with a small bridge made from language you already control. This ability is more valuable than memorizing thousands of rare words because it allows your existing vocabulary to become flexible. A learner may know 10,000 words but remain silent when one specific expression disappears, while another learner may know only 3,000 words yet communicate successfully because those words can be rearranged, simplified, and expanded in many different ways. Fluency is not only the size of your vocabulary, it is the number of useful paths you can create with the vocabulary you possess. To strengthen this skill, choose ordinary objects around you and describe them without using their names. Look at a chair and explain that it is a piece of furniture people sit on. Look at a refrigerator and explain that it is a large machine that keeps food cold. Look at a key and explain that it is a small metal object used to open a lock. This exercise may appear simple, but it teaches your brain not to collapse when one word is unavailable because it learns that meaning can survive through description. After describing objects, practice the same method with emotions, jobs, actions, and abstract ideas. Explain jealous without using the word by saying that it is the uncomfortable feeling you experience when someone has something you desire. Explain hesitate by saying that it means stopping briefly because you are uncertain about what to do. Explain responsibility by describing something you are expected to manage or complete. The more often you practice moving around missing language, the less frightening a blank moment becomes during real conversation. Another habit fluent speakers use is simplification, because they understand that a complicated thought does not always require a complicated sentence. Many learners become silent not because they have no English, but because the sentence they are trying to translate is too long, detailed, and advanced for their current speaking control. They create a sophisticated idea in their first language, attempt to transfer every detail into English without changing the structure, and then become trapped halfway through because the grammar, vocabulary, and organization require more mental energy than they can manage in real time. A fluent communicator breaks that large thought into smaller parts and delivers one piece at a time. Instead of trying to say, although I had originally intended to complete the project before the deadline, several unexpected technical problems prevented me from progressing as efficiently as I had planned. You can say, I wanted to finish the project early, but I faced several technical problems, so the work took longer than I expected. The meaning remains clear, but the mental load becomes much lighter because each idea is carried by a manageable sentence. Simple English does not mean childish English, and choosing a clear structure is not evidence of weakness. In fact, the strongest speakers are often those who can take a complicated subject and make it understandable through direct language. Confusion is not intelligence, and complicated vocabulary is not fluency. The purpose of speaking is to transfer meaning from your mind to another person's mind, and the simplest successful sentence is often more powerful than the most advanced unfinished one. You must therefore give yourself permission to reduce the size of your idea whenever your mind begins feeling overloaded. Say the main point first, then add details one at a time. If you are explaining why you changed jobs, begin with, I wanted better opportunities. After that sentence is complete, add, my previous position did not offer much growth. Then continue, I also wanted to learn new skills and work with a stronger team. What once appeared to be one difficult paragraph becomes several simple steps, allowing your brain to remain in control. Fluent speakers also know how to restart sentences without embarrassment, because natural communication is filled with corrections, changes, and unfinished beginnings. Learners often believe that once they start a sentence, they must complete it perfectly even if the structure becomes impossible, and this pressure can lead them deeper into confusion until they no longer remember the original idea. A confident speaker recognizes the problem early and begins again with clearer language. You can say, let me say that more clearly. What I mean is, let me start that sentence again. A better way to explain it is, or the main point I am trying to make is, and then rebuild the idea from the beginning. These phrases are not apologies for poor English. They are signs that you care about clarity and know how to manage communication. Even experienced speakers use them because thinking and speaking happen at the same time, and sometimes the first sentence structure simply does not carry the idea effectively. The ability to restart also protects your confidence because it removes the belief that every sentence is a test you must pass on the first attempt. When you know you can correct your direction calmly, mistakes stop feeling like traps. You become willing to speak more freely because you understand that the conversation allows adjustment, just as writing allows editing. Another powerful technique is repeating the main idea with different words because repetition gives your brain extra time while also helping the listener understand your message more clearly. Learners often believe repeating themselves is always a weakness, but thoughtful repetition is a natural part of communication, teaching, storytelling, and persuasion. A speaker may say, I found the experience extremely challenging. In other words, it demanded much more patience and effort than I expected. The second explanation strengthens the first while allowing the speaker to continue without rushing toward a completely new idea. When your mind becomes empty, return to the last point and express it from another angle. If you said, learning English has changed my life, continue by saying, what I mean is that English has created opportunities I did not have before, and then give an example. The repeated idea becomes a bridge toward the next part of your explanation, preventing the sudden silence that often appears when learners believe every sentence must introduce something completely new. Fluent speakers also use examples because examples transform abstract thoughts into concrete stories, and stories are usually easier for the brain to continue. You may begin by saying consistency is more important than motivation, but if your next idea disappears, you can add, for example, a learner who practices 10 minutes every day may improve faster than someone who studies for 3 hours only once a month. The example gives you a clear direction, creates additional language, and helps the listener understand your meaning without requiring advanced vocabulary. Whenever you do not know how to continue, ask yourself whether you can give a personal example. Imagine a possible situation, compare two experiences, or describe what the idea looks like in real life. One example can easily create another minute of natural speaking because it introduces people, actions, causes, results, and emotions that can be developed further. Storytelling is especially useful during blank moments because your memory often contains experiences more clearly than it contains abstract explanations. If you are discussing the importance of confidence but cannot find the next theoretical point, tell a brief story about a time when fear stopped you from speaking or a moment when confidence helped you communicate successfully. Stories provide a natural sequence because something happened first, something changed, and something happened afterward, giving your mind an organized path to follow. Another method fluent speakers use is comparison, because comparing one thing with another immediately creates structure. You can compare your English now with your English 2 years ago, online learning with classroom learning, speaking practice with grammar study, or life in a large city with life in a small town. Once you create two sides, your brain has several clear directions: similarities, differences, advantages, disadvantages, preferences, examples, and conclusions. If you become stuck while describing your current routine, compare it with your previous routine. If you run out of ideas while discussing your hometown, compare it with another city. If you cannot continue explaining why English matters, compare the opportunities available to someone who speaks English with the opportunities available to someone who does not. Comparison creates immediate speaking material because every difference gives you another idea to explore. Questions can also rescue your mind because asking yourself a silent question provides direction. When you feel your ideas ending, ask, why does this matter? When did this begin? How did I feel? What happened next? What is an example? What would happen if this changed, or what have I learned from this? These internal questions act like doors, and each door opens another part of the topic. Imagine you are speaking about your goal of improving English and suddenly feel empty. Ask yourself why the goal matters, and you can discuss career opportunities, travel, confidence, or personal growth. Ask what has prevented progress, and you can discuss inconsistent practice, fear of mistakes, or translation habits. Ask what you will do differently, and you can explain your future plan. The topic was never truly empty. Your brain simply needed a new direction. This is why preparation for speaking should focus less on writing complete sentences and more on identifying useful directions. Before discussing a topic, you may choose several guiding ideas such as background, reason, problem, example, solution, and future result. These are not memorized sentences but mental signposts that prevent you from becoming lost while still allowing natural language to develop in real time. Fluent speakers also understand the value of conversational connectors because these small expressions maintain continuity while the mind organizes the next thought. Phrases such as, "the first thing to understand is," "another important point is," "what makes this difficult is," "the reason I say this is," a good example would be, "at the same time because of that," and "looking back I realize that," do more than connect grammar. They give your mind a few valuable seconds to prepare what comes next. You should not memorize hundreds of connectors because too many choices can create more hesitation, but you should develop a small collection that feels natural and automatic. Practice using the same useful expressions across different topics until they become reliable tools. When these sentence beginnings appear without effort, you do not need to invent the entire structure from nothing every time you speak. For example, you can begin many explanations with, "One of the main reasons is that," introduce another point with, "Another thing that helped me was," add an example with, "A clear example of this is," introduce contrast with, "However, the situation becomes different when," and conclude with, "The most important lesson I have learned is." These patterns create a framework, but the meaning inside them remains flexible. Some learners worry that using familiar speaking patterns will make their English sound repetitive, but at the training stage, reliability is more important than endless variation. Native and fluent speakers also rely on common structures because communication becomes easier when the brain has trusted pathways. Once your basic connectors become automatic, Variation will develop naturally through listening, reading, and continued practice. Another important difference between fluent speakers and struggling learners is that fluent speakers use pauses without surrendering control. A pause is not automatically a failure. Confident speakers often pause before an important idea, after a difficult question, or while organizing an explanation, but their body language, facial expression, and calmness show that they are still participating in the conversation. The pause belongs to the communication rather than becoming an escape from it. A nervous learner often fills every pause with panic, lowers the eyes, apologizes repeatedly, or mentally leaves the conversation, which makes a 2-second silence feel much longer and more uncomfortable. You must train yourself to treat a pause as a normal thinking space. Breathe, maintain your calm expression, and use a phrase such as, "That is an interesting question. Let me think about the best way to explain it," or "There are several ways to look at this." These expressions acknowledge the pause while keeping you connected to the listener. Breathing plays a greater role in fluency than many learners realize because nervousness often causes shallow breathing, faster speech, and unnecessary tension in the mouth and throat. When your breathing becomes weak, your sentences feel harder to control, and the physical discomfort increases mental pressure. Fluent speakers often appear calm partly because they allow themselves to breathe naturally between ideas instead of trying to push an entire paragraph through one breath. Before answering a difficult question, take one controlled breath and begin with a simple sentence. During longer explanations, pause at the end of a complete idea, breathe, and then continue. This rhythm prevents you from rushing and gives your brain time to prepare the next sentence. Speaking stamina is not only the ability to produce more words, it is the ability to manage your energy so you can remain clear and confident for a longer period. Your speaking speed also affects blank moments because speaking too quickly forces your brain to create language faster than it can comfortably manage. Many learners rush because they believe fast English sounds fluent, but when production speed exceeds thinking speed, the sentence becomes unstable, mistakes increase, and the mind reaches exhaustion much sooner. A controlled pace allows you to choose words, pronounce clearly, and build connections without placing unnecessary pressure on your memory. Fluency is not measured by how quickly you can finish a sentence, it is measured by how smoothly you can communicate meaning. A slower speaker with clear ideas and natural pauses often sounds far more confident than a fast speaker who repeatedly becomes lost. Give your English room to breathe, because speed will improve naturally as common words and structures become automatic. Fluent speakers also listen carefully while the other person is talking, because the other person's language can provide vocabulary, structure, and ideas for the response. Learners sometimes become so focused on preparing their next sentence that they stop listening, and when it becomes their turn to speak, they have missed useful words and directions that could have supported their answer. Suppose someone asks, "Do you think working remotely improved productivity, or does it create too many distractions?" The question already gives you important vocabulary and structure. You can begin, "I think working remotely can improve productivity, but it also creates distractions," and then develop both sides. You do not always need to invent the beginning from nothing. You can reuse part of the question naturally while you prepare your own opinion. Repeating or paraphrasing the question is also a valuable strategy. You might say, "When we talk about whether remote work improves productivity, I think the answer depends on the person and the environment." This beginning confirms that you understood the question and gives your brain extra time to organize the response. Listening also helps you ask follow-up questions, and fluent conversation is not a speech competition where one person must produce English endlessly. Communication becomes easier when responsibility moves naturally between speakers. If your mind begins feeling tired, you can ask the other person, "What has your experience been? Why do you think that happens?" Or, "Have you ever faced something similar?" Their response gives you time to recover while also making the conversation more balanced and engaging. Some learners believe that asking questions reveals weakness because they think fluent speakers should always have something impressive to say, but strong communicators show interest in others and know how to create a two-way exchange. The ability to ask clear, relevant questions is an essential part of fluency because it keeps the conversation alive without forcing you to carry every moment alone. When the other person answers, listen for one interesting detail and build your next response around it. You can agree, disagree politely, ask for an example, share a related experience, or compare their situation with your own. This creates a natural cycle in which each idea produces another, reducing the pressure to generate completely new subjects. Fluent speakers also know how to remain honest when they do not understand something. Learners often pretend to understand because they fear embarrassment, but this usually creates a bigger problem when they are expected to respond. Confident communication includes asking for clarification. You can say, "Could you explain what you mean by that? Do you mean that the problem started recently? Could you say that in another way?" Or, "I understood the main idea, but I missed the final part." Requesting clarification does not prove that your English is weak. It proves that you care about responding accurately. Even native speakers ask others to repeat, explain, or clarify because pronunciation, noise, unfamiliar topics, and complicated ideas can affect understanding in any language. Another major cause of blankness is the pressure to sound impressive, because learners often reject the first simple sentence that appears in their mind while searching for a more advanced version. The simple sentence could have continued the conversation immediately, but perfectionism blocks it, and after several seconds the learner has neither the easy sentence nor the advanced one. You must build the habit of trusting the first clear language that appears. If someone asks why you are learning English and your mind produces, "I want better opportunities," say it. You can expand afterward by explaining the type of opportunities you want. Do not remain silent while searching for a more sophisticated sentence such as, "I aspire to enhance my professional prospects in an increasingly globalized environment," because communication does not become more valuable simply because the words are longer. A simple beginning creates momentum, and momentum helps the next sentence appear. Silence creates pressure, and pressure makes the next sentence harder. Therefore, when you are uncertain, begin with what you know rather than waiting for everything you want. This principle can be trained through 2-second response practice, where you answer ordinary questions almost immediately. The goal is not to give a complete answer in 2 seconds, but to begin within 2 seconds. You can start with, "That is important to me because my first reaction is that I have mixed feelings about this," or "From my experience, I would say." Once the answer has started, your mind has movement, and movement makes continued speaking easier. You should also practice speaking without deleting your first sentence mentally. Many learners begin an answer, judge it before finishing, and attempt to rebuild it several times, creating broken speech and increasing anxiety. Complete the simple thought first, then improve or clarify afterward. Communication needs forward movement more than constant internal editing. Another skill fluent speakers possess is the ability to stay emotionally detached from small mistakes. They may notice that they used the wrong tense or pronounced a word imperfectly, but they do not allow that mistake to consume the attention needed for the next sentence. Learners often carry one error forward for several minutes, thinking about it while the conversation continues, which makes new mistakes more likely because their mental resources are divided. You must decide which mistakes deserve immediate correction and which can be left behind. If the mistake changes the meaning completely, correct it briefly by saying, "Sorry, I meant tomorrow, not yesterday," and continue. If the listener already understands, allow the conversation to move forward and review the error later. Your speaking practice cannot become fluent if every imperfect detail forces an emergency stop. This does not mean accuracy is unimportant. It means accuracy and fluency require different moments of attention. During active communication, protect the meaning and flow. Afterward, review repeated errors and improve them through focused practice. Trying to perform deep grammatical analysis while speaking is like trying to repair a car engine while driving at full speed. Both activities matter, but they cannot always happen effectively at the same time. Your relationship with mistakes determines how much speaking practice you receive, because a learner who fears mistakes avoids difficult conversations, while a learner who accepts temporary imperfections speaks more often and therefore improves faster. Confidence does not come from never making mistakes. It comes from discovering that mistakes can happen without destroying the conversation. Fluent speakers are also comfortable using familiar language repeatedly when the situation requires it. They do not constantly pressure themselves to produce a new synonym for every common word. Learners may become stuck because they have already used important twice and believe they must now find a more advanced alternative. But if important clearly expresses the meaning, using it again is better than becoming silent. Vocabulary variety is useful, but continuity is more valuable during real-time speaking. You can improve variety later by reviewing recordings and learning alternatives such as essential, valuable, significant, or necessary. But the conversation should not collapse because one familiar word appears more than once. Another way to protect your flow is to use sentence families, which are groups of flexible patterns that can express many different ideas. A pattern such as, "One of the reasons I believe this is that," can support opinions about education, technology, health, work, travel, or relationships. A pattern such as, "The biggest change I have noticed is," can support discussions about personal growth, learning progress, lifestyle, or professional experience. When these sentence families become automatic, they reduce the number of decisions your brain must make. You no longer need to create grammar from the beginning every time because the basic structure is ready, and you only need to place the new idea inside it. This creates mental space for organization, vocabulary, and expression. You can build sentence families by collecting useful patterns from English content and practicing them across many topics. Do not memorize an entire paragraph from a video. Take one flexible structure and make 10 original sentences with it. For example, practice, "What I find most difficult about this is," with English learning, work, exercise, saving money, maintaining relationships, and managing time. The structure becomes yours only when you can use it with your own meaning. Fluent speakers also know that not every answer needs to be long. Sometimes learners become blank because they believe they must produce a perfect 2-minute response to every question. Natural conversation contains short answers, clarifications, reactions, questions, and longer explanations. You can answer simply, allow the other person to respond, and then add more detail when it becomes relevant. Speaking stamina does not mean forcing yourself to dominate every conversation. It means remaining mentally available in English for the full interaction, whether you are speaking, listening, asking, reacting, or explaining. A person may communicate fluently for 20 minutes without delivering a single 5-minute speech because fluency is sustained participation, not endless talking. You should also learn natural reaction phrases because they keep you connected while your brain prepares a deeper response. Expressions such as, "That makes sense," "I had not thought about it that way," "That is similar to my experience," "I completely understand your point," or "I am not sure I agree with that," allow you to respond immediately while deciding what to say next. These reactions are not empty language when used sincerely. They show the listener that you are engaged, and they provide a bridge into your opinion, question, or example. The conversation continues, and your brain receives a few extra seconds without creating uncomfortable silence. Another hidden reason the mind goes blank is that learners try to think about content, grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, facial expression, and the listener's opinion simultaneously, which creates impossible mental pressure. Fluent speakers do not consciously manage every area at the same intensity because many language patterns have become automatic and their attention remains focused mainly on meaning. During your own practice, choose one primary goal at a time. In a stamina session, focus on continuing. In a pronunciation session, focus on clear sounds. In a grammar session, focus on one structure. You can gradually combine these abilities, but expecting perfect control of everything from the beginning creates mental exhaustion. When speaking in a real conversation, place meaning first. Ask yourself, what do I want this person to understand? That question simplifies your task and pulls attention away from fear. The listener does not need to witness perfect grammar. The listener needs to understand your message. Preparation can reduce blank moments, but the right kind of preparation is important. Memorizing complete answers may make one topic sound smooth while leaving you helpless when the question changes slightly. Preparing key ideas, personal examples, and flexible structures creates much stronger speaking ability because you can adapt them to different situations. For an interview, do not memorize a 3-minute answer word for word. Prepare the main situation, the challenge, the action you took, the result, and what you learned. For a presentation, prepare the sequence of ideas and several transition phrases rather than trying to remember every sentence. For a social conversation, prepare a few questions and stories, but allow the language to develop naturally. The purpose of preparation is to give your mind a map, not a prison. A memorized script can create panic when one sentence is forgotten because every later sentence depends on the exact order, while a flexible map allows you to skip, return, simplify, or explain differently without losing the whole message. You can also prepare rescue topics for social situations, including travel, food, work, hobbies, recent experiences, future plans, and local places. When one subject ends, you can move naturally toward another by saying, "That reminds me of, speaking of travel," or "I had a similar experience recently." Topic transitions prevent the conversation from dying simply because one idea has reached its conclusion. Fluent speakers recognize when a topic has finished and move forward instead of desperately trying to stretch an empty subject. Speaking stamina includes the ability to change direction. You do not have to keep discussing the same idea forever. When you have communicated the main point, connect it to a related topic or ask the other person a question. For example, after discussing your job, you can say, "That is one reason I have started learning new skills. Have you ever taken an online course?" The conversation moves from work to education naturally. After discussing food, you can ask whether the person enjoys cooking or has visited a memorable restaurant. Each subject contains several doors toward the next one. Another important habit is visual thinking, because images and scenes can be easier to describe than abstract words are to retrieve. When telling a story, imagine the place, the people, the movement, and the emotion. Describe what you can mentally see. The visual memory gives your brain a sequence, reducing the pressure to invent ideas. If you are describing a journey, imagine leaving home, arriving at the station, seeing the crowd, finding your seat, watching the view, and reaching the destination. Each image creates language. You do not need to memorize the story because the scene itself guides you. You can practice visual speaking by looking at a photograph for 30 seconds, hiding it, and then describing everything you remember. After that, create a possible story about what happened before and after the moment in the picture. This develops observation, description, imagination, and continuous speech while teaching your brain to generate language from images rather than translation. Fluent speakers also use emotional detail because emotions create additional depth and direction. Instead of only saying what happened, explain how you felt before, during, and after the event. Describe what worried you, surprised you, disappointed you, or made you proud. Emotions connect ideas naturally because they lead toward reasons, reactions, decisions, and lessons. If you say, "I gave a presentation at work," the topic may end quickly, but if you explain that you felt nervous beforehand, became calmer after the first minute, struggled with one question, and felt proud afterward, the same event becomes a complete story filled with meaningful English. Reflection provides another powerful way to continue. After describing an event, ask what it taught you, what you would change, how it affected your future behavior, or what advice you would give someone facing the same situation. Reflection turns a short story into a deeper explanation and develops the kind of language used in interviews, presentations, and thoughtful conversations. Fluent speakers therefore move naturally between what happened, why it happened, how it felt, what changed, and what it means now. This creates a complete speaking cycle that can support long communication without requiring constant new topics. Your mind may also go blank because you do not practice speaking about unfamiliar subjects, and when a real conversation moves beyond your usual topics, you lose both ideas and vocabulary. To build flexibility, choose one new topic several times each week and explore it using simple questions. You do not need expert knowledge. Your goal is learning how to respond when information is limited. You can say, "I do not know much about this subject, but my first impression is," or "I have never experienced this personally, although I imagine that," and then offer a careful thought. This allows you to participate honestly without pretending to possess knowledge you do not have. You can also ask for context by saying, "Could you tell me a little more about that?" and then respond to the new information. Real communication does not require having a prepared opinion about everything. It requires being able to listen, think, question, and react. Another advanced stamina skill is holding the main message in your mind while allowing the exact words to change. Learners often become attached to one sentence they planned and feel lost when they cannot reproduce it, while fluent speakers protect the meaning rather than the wording. They may express the same idea in a completely different structure without feeling that anything has been lost. Before speaking, identify the one message you want the listener to remember. If you are explaining a work problem, the message might be that the deadline must be extended. If you are telling a story, the message might be that the experience taught you patience. If you are sharing an opinion, the message might be that daily practice matters more than occasional motivation. As long as that message reaches the listener, the exact route can change. This removes enormous pressure because you are no longer responsible for protecting one perfect sentence. You are responsible only for carrying the meaning safely. Fluent speakers are also willing to use gestures, facial expressions, and voice to support meaning because communication is larger than vocabulary. A gesture can help describe shape, direction, size, or movement. Your tone can show surprise, uncertainty, enthusiasm, or seriousness. These tools reduce pressure on language and make your message more natural. You should not depend entirely on gestures, but you also should not freeze your body because you are concentrating too intensely on words. Natural movement can help the brain remain relaxed, and a relaxed speaker usually accesses language more easily than a rigid speaker who treats every conversation like an examination. The environment matters as well because noise, unfamiliar people, time pressure, and emotional stress can reduce speaking performance temporarily. Do not judge your entire English ability by your most difficult conversation. A learner may speak comfortably alone but struggle in a group because several voices, accents, and reactions demand additional attention. This does not mean the earlier practice was false, it means the environment increased the challenge. Build pressure gradually. Begin with solo recording, then speak with one supportive person, then join a small group, then practice in less predictable situations. Speaking stamina must include social stamina, and social stamina grows through repeated exposure rather than one dramatic act of courage. Before a challenging conversation, remind yourself that the goal is not to prove your English level, but to exchange meaning. Choose one simple objective, such as asking a question, sharing one opinion, or telling one brief story. Small, successful experiences teach your nervous system that English conversation is safe, which makes future access easier. After the conversation, avoid replaying only the most uncomfortable moment. Notice what you understood, what you communicated, how you recovered, and what you will practice next. Your brain needs evidence of success, not endless proof of imperfection. A powerful training method for blank moments is controlled difficulty, where you deliberately practice losing access and recovering. Choose a topic and speak for 2 minutes, but avoid using one common word. If the topic is technology, avoid the word important. If the topic is travel, avoid the word beautiful. This forces your brain to find alternatives and teaches flexibility. You can also choose an object and explain it to an imaginary listener who has never seen it, or tell a story while changing one detail each time you repeat it. These challenges make ordinary speaking feel easier because your brain becomes accustomed to creating new routes. Another useful exercise is the interruption drill. Record yourself speaking, pause at a random moment, wait for 3 seconds, and then continue from the same idea. This trains recovery after interruptions, which often happen in real conversation when someone asks a question, a phone rings, or your attention briefly shifts. You can also practice correction by deliberately beginning a sentence poorly and then saying, "Let me put that differently," before expressing it clearly. This removes fear from restarting because correction becomes a familiar skill rather than an emergency. Fluent speakers do not avoid every difficult moment. They have simply experienced enough difficult moments to know that communication can survive them. Each successful recovery becomes evidence that blankness is temporary. Your confidence grows not because your mind never empties, but because you trust your ability to fill the space again. You should create a personal rescue system containing several tools that feel natural to you. Your system might include one phrase for gaining time, one phrase for restarting, one method for describing a forgotten word, one method for giving an example, one method for asking the listener a question, and one method for moving toward a related topic. For gaining time, you may use, "Let me think about the best way to explain this." For restarting, you may use, "What I am really trying to say is." For a missing word, you may say, "I cannot remember the exact term, but it is something that." For an example, you may use, "A clear example from my own life is." For returning the conversation, you may ask, "Have you ever experienced something similar?" For changing topics, you may say, "That connects with another important point." Practice these tools until they become automatic, because a rescue phrase that cannot be remembered under pressure will not help you. Use them during daily recordings even when you do not need them, so they become familiar enough to appear naturally when a real blank moment arrives. However, do not fill every sentence with rescue phrases because their purpose is to support communication, not replace meaningful content. Use them as bridges, then continue toward the idea. A bridge is valuable because it helps you cross a difficult space, but you are not supposed to remain standing on the bridge forever. Another reason learners go blank is that they have not developed enough topic knowledge in English, even when they understand the subject in their own language. Knowing information and being able to discuss it in English are different abilities. You may understand your profession deeply but lack the common English expressions required to explain your work smoothly. To solve this, build small topic banks around subjects that regularly appear in your life. If you work in business, collect common language for projects, deadlines, meetings, challenges, results, and future plans. If you are a student, build language around courses, assignments, exams, research, and goals. If you enjoy fitness, collect language for routines, progress, energy, discipline, and health. Do not memorize disconnected vocabulary. Learn words inside useful sentence patterns and practice explaining real experiences. The goal is not creating an impressive list, but building a familiar speaking environment inside each important topic. For every topic bank, prepare a simple introduction, several common questions, one personal story, one opinion, one challenge, and one future goal. These elements give you enough material to handle many conversations without memorizing one fixed speech. Fluent speakers also reuse language across topics. Expressions for explaining reasons, giving examples, comparing, disagreeing, and concluding can support almost any subject. This is why mastering high-frequency communication patterns produces greater speaking power than studying rare topic-specific words alone. As your rescue skills improve, you will notice that the moment of blankness begins changing shape. At first, it may feel like a locked door with no handle, but later it becomes a brief pause in which several options appear. You may simplify the sentence, describe the missing word, give an example, ask a question, return to the previous idea, or move toward a connected topic. The blank space no longer controls you because you possess choices. Choice reduces panic because the brain understands that one missing route does not create total failure. This is the deeper purpose of fluency training, not eliminating every difficulty, but creating enough flexibility that difficulty cannot silence you. Eventually, you may even begin appreciating blank moments because they reveal where your speaking system needs strengthening. A forgotten word shows which vocabulary needs active practice. A confusing explanation shows which sentence structure needs simplification. A weak story shows where more organization is required. Every difficulty contains useful information when you observe it without attacking yourself. After a speaking session, note the exact moment you became stuck and ask what kind of problem occurred. Did you lack the idea, the vocabulary, the grammar structure, or the confidence to continue? These problems require different solutions. If the idea was missing, practice question prompts and topic expansion. If vocabulary was missing, build circumlocution and active retrieval. If structure was missing, practice sentence families and shorter clauses. If confidence disappeared, practice recovery phrases and controlled pressure. This careful diagnosis is far more effective than saying "my English is bad," because that statement is too broad to produce improvement. A specific problem can be trained. A negative identity can only create discouragement. You must also remember that mental energy changes during the day. Speaking may feel easier when you are rested and more difficult when you are stressed, hungry, or exhausted. This variation does not erase your progress. Even fluent speakers communicate differently according to their physical and emotional condition. Train sometimes when your energy is strong so you can develop skill, and occasionally practice when you feel slightly tired so you can develop resilience. But do not punish yourself through extreme sessions that create a negative relationship with English. Stamina grows through challenge followed by recovery, not through constant exhaustion. Rest, sleep, and emotional calm support language access because the brain requires energy to retrieve, organize, and produce speech. Your English practice is not separate from your overall well-being. A calmer and healthier mind often communicates more effectively. Another major shift happens when you stop seeing the listener as a judge and begin seeing them as a partner. Most people in ordinary conversation are not counting your grammar mistakes. They are trying to understand your idea, share their own experience, and maintain connection. When you imagine that every listener is examining your English, your body becomes tense and your memory weakens. Look at the person, listen to the meaning, and respond to the human being rather than the imaginary examiner inside your mind. Communication becomes easier when your attention moves outward toward connection instead of inward toward self-judgment. Even when someone notices a mistake, that moment does not define your ability. The purpose of language is not hiding every weakness, it is creating understanding despite imperfection. People remember sincerity, clarity, interest, and confidence far more than one incorrect verb ending. Fluent speakers often sound fluent because they remain emotionally present. They respond to the person, react to the story, ask meaningful questions, and express genuine opinions. Their language supports connection rather than becoming the entire focus of the interaction. You can practice this by speaking about subjects that matter to you emotionally. Describe a goal you care about, a person who influenced you, a lesson that changed your thinking, or a challenge you overcame. When your attention is deeply connected to meaning, language often flows more naturally because the desire to communicate becomes stronger than the desire to perform perfectly. As you become more experienced, you will learn that there are different kinds of blankness. Sometimes the vocabulary disappears, sometimes the idea disappears, sometimes you understand the idea but cannot organize it, and sometimes fear simply blocks access to everything. Recognizing the type helps you choose the correct response. When vocabulary disappears, describe, simplify, or use a more general word. When the idea disappears, return to the question, repeat your main point, or give an example. When organization disappears, pause and say, "There are two main things I want to explain," then divide the answer. When fear blocks you, breathe, slow down, and begin with one simple sentence. You do not need one magical solution because blank moments are different, but you can develop a flexible system that responds to each problem calmly. For idea blankness, one powerful method is the past, present, future structure. If you do not know how to continue, explain what the situation was like before, what it is like now, and what you expect later. This works for your career, education, English journey, hometown, technology, health habits, relationships, and almost any changing subject. Another structure is problem, cause, solution, where you describe the difficulty, explain why it happens, and suggest what could improve it. This supports discussions about language learning, work, society, technology, environmental issues, and personal challenges. A third structure is opinion, reason, example, result, where you state your view, explain why you hold it, give a supporting example, and describe the consequence. These structures do not need to be announced formally, but they give your mind a clear route when spontaneous ideas feel weak. You can practice each structure across many topics until choosing one becomes automatic. When a difficult question appears, your mind will no longer face an empty space, it will recognize a familiar path. Fluent speakers also know how to finish an answer clearly. Learners sometimes continue speaking until they become lost because they do not know when or how to stop, and the final confusion makes them believe the entire answer was unsuccessful. A strong conclusion can protect the message even if some middle sentences were imperfect. You can conclude by summarizing the main point, sharing the lesson, stating your preference, or explaining the next step. Say, "So overall, I believe daily practice is more effective than occasional long study," or "The main lesson I learned was that preparation reduces fear," or "That is why I plan to continue improving this skill." Knowing how to finish also reduces anxiety because you are not trapped inside an endless answer. You can communicate the main idea, support it, and close confidently before inviting the listener to respond. During practice, deliberately end your speaking instead of waiting until your mind becomes completely empty. This teaches you to control the conversation rather than allowing exhaustion to control you. Speaking stamina includes intelligent energy management, and strong speakers know when an idea has been completed. When you combine these habits, your entire relationship with blankness begins transforming. The forgotten word becomes an opportunity to describe. The confusing sentence becomes an opportunity to restart. The empty topic becomes an opportunity to ask a question or give an example. The long pause becomes a calm moment for breathing and organization. The mistake becomes something you can correct briefly or leave behind without losing the conversation. You are no longer dependent on perfect memory because you have flexibility. You are no longer dependent on advanced vocabulary because you can simplify. You are no longer dependent on memorized sentences because you can build ideas in real time. You are no longer dependent on confidence appearing before you speak because every successful recovery creates confidence while you are speaking. This is the true speaking stamina fluent communicators possess. Their minds do not remain perfectly full at every second. They simply know how to continue during the moments when the next sentence is not immediately available. Your goal is therefore not to promise yourself that your mind will never go blank again because that promise is unrealistic and unnecessary. Your goal is to become so familiar with recovery that blankness no longer frightens you. You will notice the pause, choose a tool, and continue without turning one difficult second into a complete emotional collapse. Begin training this today by choosing one topic and speaking for 5 minutes without stopping the recording. When a word disappears, describe it. When your sentence becomes confusing, restart it. When the idea ends, give an example. When the topic becomes empty, compare it with something else. When your confidence falls, slow down and breathe. When you reach the end, summarize the main point clearly. Listen afterward and do not focus only on the moments when you struggled. Notice every moment when you recovered, because those recoveries are the evidence that fluency is already developing. The goal of the exercise is not creating a perfect recording. It is proving to your brain that English can continue after difficulty. Repeat the same topic the following day and use the lessons from the first attempt. You will probably notice that the language appears faster, the structure becomes clearer, and the blank moments become shorter. Repeat it again several days later without preparation, and you may discover that the topic now feels natural because your brain has built multiple routes through it. Then choose a new topic and carry the recovery skills with you. Over time, you will stop needing to plan every rescue consciously because the habits will become automatic. Your mind will explain, simplify, restart, connect, and continue before panic has time to take control. The strongest transformation will appear in real conversations, where you will suddenly realize that forgetting a word no longer feels like a disaster. You will smile, describe what you mean, and continue. You may even notice that the listener helps you find the word, and instead of feeling embarrassed, you will accept it naturally because the conversation remained alive. You will also discover that listeners often care far less about the missing word than you imagined. They may understand your description immediately, offer the vocabulary, or simply continue responding to the meaning. The frightening judgment existed mostly inside your own mind. As your confidence grows, your attention will move away from monitoring every sentence and toward sharing real ideas. You will begin showing more personality, humor, curiosity, and emotion because your mental energy is no longer being consumed by fear. This is when English stops feeling like a school subject and begins feeling like a living part of your identity. You will still experience challenging moments because growth never removes every difficulty, but the challenge will no longer silence you. You will know that there is always another sentence, another explanation, another question, another example, or another path toward the meaning. Remember that a mind going blank is not the opposite of fluency. Remaining silent because you believe blankness means failure is what prevents fluency from growing. The moment you continue despite uncertainty, you are practicing the deepest form of speaking stamina. A fluent speaker is not someone whose mind never becomes empty. A fluent speaker is someone who has learned not to fear the empty moment because they trust that another idea can be built, another word can be chosen, and another path can be opened. You already know enough English to begin developing this trust. You do not need to wait until your vocabulary is complete, because no vocabulary is ever complete. You do not need perfect grammar because communication can survive imperfection. You do not need endless confidence because confidence can be rebuilt after every difficult pause. What you need is the courage to stay inside English when your old habit tells you to escape, the patience to express one idea through simpler language when the perfect words refuse to appear, and the discipline to practice recovery until continuing becomes more natural than freezing. Every time you survive a blank moment without surrendering, your speaking stamina becomes stronger. Every time you describe a forgotten word, restart a broken sentence, or create an example instead of becoming silent, your brain learns that difficulty is temporary and communication can continue. Eventually, the moment that once ended your English after 30 seconds will become only a small pause inside a much longer conversation, and you will look back with surprise at how much power you once gave to a forgotten word. Because you will finally understand that your English was never disappearing, it was simply waiting for you to stop demanding perfection and start trusting your ability to find another way forward. Chapter 7. Become the person who can speak English anytime, anywhere. There comes a point in every serious English learner's journey when learning one more grammar rule, memorizing another vocabulary list, or watching another lesson no longer creates the breakthrough they are waiting for, because the final barrier is not hidden inside a textbook, a classroom, or a new learning method, but inside the identity they carry every time they open their mouth and attempt to speak. You may have spent years seeing yourself as someone who is still learning, still preparing, still waiting, and still hoping that one day you will finally become ready. But speaking stamina cannot reach its highest level while you continue thinking of fluent English as something that belongs to a future version of you who has more vocabulary, fewer mistakes, better pronunciation, and greater confidence than you possess today. The final stage of fluency begins when you stop seeing English as a performance you occasionally attempt and begin seeing it as a language you are already allowed to use in ordinary life, even when your sentences are not perfect, your vocabulary is simple, or your confidence changes from one day to another. This shift may sound small, but it changes the entire direction of your learning, because a person who is preparing to speak behaves very differently from a person who already speaks, just as someone who dreams about becoming physically strong behaves differently from someone who has made exercise a permanent part of their identity. When you believe that you are only a learner, every conversation feels like an examination, every mistake feels like evidence that you are not ready, every pause feels embarrassing, and every fluent speaker appears to belong to a different world that you have not yet entered. When you begin seeing yourself as an English speaker who is continuing to improve, mistakes become part of communication, pauses become moments of thought, practice becomes natural, and fluent speakers no longer appear to possess a mysterious ability that you cannot develop. They simply represent a later stage of the same process you are already living. You do not need to wait for permission to call yourself an English speaker, because the moment you use English to express a real thought, ask a genuine question, explain an experience, or connect with another person, you are already doing what English speakers do. Your level may continue improving for many years, but your identity does not have to remain trapped at the entrance until every weakness has disappeared. A child who is learning to walk is still a person who walks, even when the movement is unstable, slow, and filled with falls. Nobody tells the child to wait until every step is perfect before standing again. The child becomes stronger by walking imperfectly, falling safely, correcting balance, and continuing. In the same way, you become an English speaker by speaking imperfectly, recovering from difficulty, developing stronger control, and returning to the language again and again until what once required enormous effort begins feeling natural. The greatest transformation happens when English is no longer something you only study during a fixed lesson, but something you carry into your thoughts, decisions, routines, relationships, and daily experiences. A language becomes strong when it becomes connected to real life, because the brain remembers what it repeatedly uses for meaningful purposes far more deeply than what it only reviews for an exercise. If English appears only when you open a textbook, your brain learns that English belongs to study time. If English appears when you plan your day, describe your feelings, solve a problem, express an opinion, tell a story, or speak to another human being, your brain begins learning that English belongs to life itself. This is when speaking stamina grows beyond practice sessions and starts following you into unexpected situations. You may have experienced the frustrating difference between sounding confident while practicing alone and suddenly becoming nervous when another person appears. Alone, you can speak for several minutes, choose your pace, restart sentences, and ignore mistakes. But in a real conversation, you become aware of the listener's face, the pressure of time, the possibility of misunderstanding, and the fear that your English will disappear at the worst possible moment. This difference does not mean your private practice has failed. It means you are entering a new level of training where language skill and emotional control must learn to work together. Speaking anytime and anywhere requires more than vocabulary and grammar because real conversations are unpredictable. You cannot control every question, topic, accent, reaction, interruption, or misunderstanding, and this unpredictability is exactly what makes spontaneous speaking feel dangerous to many learners. They become comfortable only when they know what will happen next. But fluency grows when you learn to remain calm even when the conversation moves in an unexpected direction. You must stop expecting real conversations to feel like prepared exercises because the goal of practice is not to eliminate uncertainty but to make you more flexible inside it. A confident speaker does not know every sentence before the conversation begins. They trust their ability to listen, respond, simplify, ask questions, clarify meaning, and continue even when the path changes. This trust is not created through positive thinking alone. It is created through evidence, and every time you speak despite nervousness, recover after forgetting a word, ask for clarification without shame, or complete a conversation that once seemed frightening, you give your brain another piece of evidence that English communication is survivable. Confidence is not the absence of discomfort, it is the memory of successfully moving through discomfort many times. Your brain naturally tries to protect you from experiences that feel uncertain, and when speaking English has been associated with embarrassment, judgment, or failure, your nervous system may react before you consciously decide what to do. Your heart may beat faster, your breathing may become shallow, your mouth may feel tense, and words that appeared easily during practice may suddenly become difficult to retrieve. This reaction is not proof that your English has vanished, it is simply your body treating communication like danger. The solution is not waiting until nervousness disappears completely because avoidance often teaches the brain that the situation truly was dangerous. The solution is controlled exposure, where you enter increasingly challenging speaking situations while giving yourself enough support to succeed. Every successful exposure teaches your nervous system that English can be used safely, and over time the fear response becomes weaker because your brain collects new memories that challenge the old ones. Begin with situations that feel slightly uncomfortable but still manageable. You may record your voice and imagine that another person is listening. Send a short English voice message to someone supportive. Answer a question during an online lesson. Speak briefly with a language partner, or ask one simple question in a real environment. The goal is not creating a perfect performance. The goal is remaining present long enough for your brain to discover that nothing terrible happens when your English is imperfect. After each experience, resist the habit of reviewing only the most uncomfortable moment, because anxious minds often ignore everything that worked and focus entirely on one forgotten word, one incorrect tense, or one confused sentence. Instead, ask yourself what you communicated successfully, how long you stayed in English, whether the listener understood the main meaning, and what recovery skill helped you continue. Your memory of the event must include success, not only imperfection, because confidence is built from the story you repeatedly tell yourself about what happened. Suppose you spoke for 5 minutes, communicated several ideas clearly, asked 2 questions, and made one obvious grammar mistake, but afterward you think only about that single mistake. Your brain concludes that the conversation was a failure, even though most of the evidence says otherwise. This habit can destroy confidence despite genuine progress. A stronger interpretation would be that you remained in English for 5 minutes, connected with another person, and discovered one grammar pattern to improve later. You do not need to lie to yourself or pretend every conversation was perfect. You need to evaluate the experience accurately. Accuracy includes weaknesses, but it also includes courage, improvement, understanding, recovery, and connection. When your self-evaluation becomes balanced, you are more willing to speak again, and speaking again is what creates the next level of growth. Another major step toward becoming an anytime, anywhere speaker is learning how to carry English into different environments instead of depending on one comfortable place. Many learners can speak well in their bedroom during a planned lesson or with one familiar person, but struggle in a cafe, workplace, group conversation, online meeting, telephone call, or unexpected social situation because each environment adds new demands. A noisy location requires stronger listening concentration. A group conversation requires faster turn-taking. A phone call removes facial expressions and gestures. A professional situation creates pressure to sound clear and organized. A conversation with a stranger adds emotional uncertainty. These challenges are not separate proof that your English is weak. They are different forms of speaking stamina that must be developed gradually. Physical stamina changes according to the environment, because running on a flat road is different from running uphill, running in heat, or running in a crowded place. Speaking stamina changes in the same way. Your ability in one situation creates a foundation, but each new environment requires adaptation. The solution is not returning permanently to the easiest environment. It is introducing controlled variety until your English learns how to remain available under different conditions. You can practice telephone stamina by recording audio without looking at notes, because the absence of visual support forces you to organize meaning through voice alone. You can practice group stamina by watching a discussion and pausing to respond to different speakers as if you were participating. You can practice workplace stamina by explaining a project, describing a problem, giving an update, or requesting clarification in a calm and professional way. You can practice social stamina by preparing stories, reactions, questions, and follow-up language that keeps informal conversation balanced. You should also practice speaking while performing simple physical activities such as walking, preparing food, organizing a room, or traveling, because this teaches the brain to produce English without requiring complete stillness and concentration. Real communication often happens while attention is shared with the environment, and practicing under gentle distraction can make spontaneous speaking more resilient. However, increase difficulty gradually because overwhelming yourself creates panic instead of adaptation. Begin with small environmental changes, such as speaking while standing instead of sitting, recording in a different room, practicing with mild background noise, or answering a question without preparation. When these conditions become comfortable, increase the challenge slightly. This progressive approach teaches your brain that English remains accessible across environments, and eventually the language stops belonging to one safe location. It travels with you. Speaking anytime also means learning how to begin even when you do not feel fully prepared. Many learners experience a long period of internal preparation before every English interaction. They silently build the opening sentence, check the grammar, imagine possible answers, and wait for confidence to rise, but the moment often passes before they speak. They may see an opportunity to ask a question, join a discussion, or greet someone, yet hesitation keeps them silent until the conversation has already moved forward. To break this pattern, develop a beginning reflex. A beginning reflex is the habit of entering communication with a simple, reliable opening before your mind has time to create unnecessary fear. You do not need to know the entire conversation, you only need to begin the first sentence. In a social situation, the beginning may be, "How has your day been?" In a professional situation, it may be, "I would like to clarify one point." In a group discussion, it may be, "I agree with part of that, but I see it slightly differently." When asking for help, it may be, "Could you help me understand this?" The first sentence creates movement, and movement reduces the power of hesitation. Your brain often demands certainty before action, but communication rarely offers certainty. You cannot know exactly how the other person will respond, which topic will follow, or whether the conversation will be easy. If you wait for complete certainty, you will wait forever. The stronger habit is trusting that you can respond one sentence at a time. You do not need to carry the entire conversation inside your mind before it begins. You only need the next step. When the other person responds, listen carefully and choose another step. Fluency becomes lighter when you stop trying to solve a 10-minute conversation before saying hello. This one sentence at a time approach is especially important in unfamiliar situations because anxiety often comes from imagining the entire interaction as one enormous performance. A job interview, presentation, meeting, or conversation with a fluent speaker may feel overwhelming when seen as a complete event, but each one is actually a sequence of smaller moments. Listening to one question, understanding the main point, beginning one response, developing one idea, pausing and continuing. Break the experience into small units and remain present in the current one. Do not worry about the fifth question while answering the first. Do not imagine the final conclusion while beginning the introduction. Speaking stamina becomes stronger when your attention remains where your voice is now rather than racing ahead toward every possible difficulty. Presence is one of the most underrated parts of fluency. Learners often believe they need to think faster, but sometimes they need to think less about themselves and more about the conversation. When you are fully present, you hear the other person more accurately, notice useful vocabulary, respond to the actual meaning, and allow your natural reactions to appear. When you are trapped inside self-monitoring, you miss information and increase the pressure to invent everything alone. The goal is not removing all awareness of language but placing meaning at the center. Ask yourself what the person is truly saying, what emotion they are expressing, and what response would move the connection forward. This outward attention often releases English that fear had been blocking because your mind is finally using language for its real purpose. A conversation is not successful because every sentence was grammatically perfect. It is successful because both people exchanged meaning, understood enough, and remained connected. This does not mean you should stop improving grammar, pronunciation, or vocabulary. It means those areas should support communication rather than replace it. When accuracy becomes more important than connection, you may produce fewer mistakes but also fewer sentences, fewer risks, and fewer opportunities to grow. When communication comes first, you speak more, discover your weaknesses naturally, and build the stamina required to improve accuracy inside real use. You must also learn to speak when your emotional state is not perfect, because English will not always appear on calm and motivated days. There will be moments when you are tired, busy, disappointed, excited, nervous, distracted, or under pressure, and if your speaking identity depends on feeling confident before beginning, your progress will remain unstable. Strong speakers do not always feel powerful before they communicate. They use routines that help them become functional despite changing emotions. Before an important conversation, they may breathe slowly, review a few key ideas, remind themselves of the main objective, and begin with simple language. Their confidence may grow during the conversation rather than existing completely beforehand. Create your own pre-speaking routine, but keep it short enough to use anywhere. Take one calm breath, relax your shoulders, remind yourself that your goal is communication, identify the first simple sentence, and begin. This routine tells your body that you have entered a familiar process, reducing the sense that every interaction is a completely new danger. Your internal language before speaking also matters. If you repeatedly tell yourself, "I am going to fail, my mind will become blank, or this person will judge me," your body prepares for threat. Replace these predictions with grounded instructions such as, "I only need to communicate one idea at a time. I can simplify anything difficult. A pause is not failure, and I know how to recover." These are not empty motivational statements because each one reminds you of a real skill developed in earlier chapters. You can simplify, describe, restart, ask, pause, and continue. Confidence becomes credible when it is connected to tools. You may still feel nervous, but nervousness and communication can exist together. You do not need to remove the feeling before speaking. You need to stop treating the feeling as an order to remain silent. Many learners wait for fear to disappear, while fluent speakers often act before fear has completely left. Through repeated action, the fear gradually loses authority because the brain learns that nervousness does not predict failure. You can feel uncomfortable and still communicate clearly enough. You can make mistakes and still complete the conversation. You can lose one word and still explain the meaning. This discovery is one of the most freeing moments in language learning because it separates emotional discomfort from actual ability. Feeling uncertain does not mean you are incapable. Feeling slow does not mean you have lost progress. Feeling nervous does not mean your English will fail. You should also stop measuring fluency only through your best performance, because true speaking stamina includes the ability to remain functional on ordinary and difficult days. Anyone may sound strong after perfect preparation in a comfortable environment, but deeper fluency appears when you can still communicate after an unexpected question, a stressful moment, or a temporary mistake. The goal is not performing at your highest level every day. The goal is raising your lowest level so that even on weaker days you can still express the main idea, ask for help, explain a problem, or continue a conversation. This is what reliability means. A professional athlete does not expect a personal record during every training session. Some days are powerful, others are ordinary, and a few feel unexpectedly difficult. But the athlete continues because progress is measured across time. Treat your English speaking in the same way. One weak day cannot cancel months of training, and one strong day does not mean the journey is finished. Your identity must be stronger than your daily performance. You are an English speaker who sometimes speaks smoothly and sometimes struggles, just as every speaker in every language experiences variation. This balanced identity protects you from dramatic conclusions when one conversation does not go well. Another part of becoming an anytime speaker is developing conversational independence, which means you do not depend entirely on the other person asking perfect questions or carrying the discussion. You learn how to introduce ideas, ask follow-up questions, react naturally, tell relevant stories, and move toward new topics when one subject ends. Many learners prepare answers but not interaction. They can respond when someone asks, "Where are you from?" or "What do you do?" But after answering, they wait silently for the next question, turning the conversation into an interview. Fluent communication becomes more balanced when you return a question, comment on the other person's answer, or connect the topic with another idea. If someone asks about your hometown, answer with enough detail and then ask where they grew up. If someone describes a difficult work experience, respond to the emotion and share a related experience or ask what happened next. If someone mentions a hobby, ask how they became interested in it. Every response can open another door. Conversational independence reduces pressure because you are no longer waiting helplessly for the other person to create the entire path. You become a participant who helps shape the exchange. To build this ability, practice the response plus question pattern. Answer the question, add one useful detail, and then ask something connected. For example, you might say, "I started learning English because I wanted better international opportunities, and speaking has always been my greatest challenge. What originally motivated you to learn another language?" This pattern creates natural balance and prevents one-word exchanges. You can also practice the reaction plus story pattern, where you respond to the other person's experience and then share a brief related story. If someone says they felt nervous during a presentation, you may reply, "I understand that feeling because I experienced something similar last year," and then describe the event. The conversation grows from shared meaning rather than disconnected topics. Another useful pattern is question plus follow-up, where you listen for one detail and ask about it. If someone says they recently moved to a new city, you can ask what the biggest adjustment has been, whether they enjoy the environment, or what surprised them most. Strong follow-up questions make you sound engaged even when your vocabulary is simple, because communication is driven by genuine attention. The ability to listen deeply becomes even more valuable in group conversations, where you may not speak continuously but must remain mentally connected for a longer time. Group speaking stamina includes following several voices, recognizing when to enter, connecting your point with what someone else said, and accepting that the topic may change quickly. You can enter a group discussion with phrases such as, "That connects with something I was thinking. I agree with that point, especially because I had a slightly different experience." Or, "Could I add one thing?" These openings show that you are responding to the existing conversation rather than beginning a separate speech. Do not wait for a perfect silence, because group conversations often contain small overlaps and quick transitions. Look for a natural opening, begin with a clear phrase, and keep your first contribution manageable. You do not need to deliver your entire opinion at once. One strong point can establish your presence and make later participation easier. If you are interrupted, do not immediately conclude that your English was poor or that people do not want to listen. Interruptions happen frequently in natural conversation, especially in energetic groups. Listen, then return by saying, "As I was saying," or "The point I wanted to add was." Protect your idea calmly without becoming defensive. Group stamina also requires emotional recovery because you may miss an opportunity, misunderstand a comment, or feel that your first contribution was not as clear as you wanted. Do not mentally leave the conversation after one uncomfortable moment. Stay present, continue listening, and look for the next opportunity. Fluency is not one perfect contribution, it is sustained participation. Professional English creates another layer of pressure because learners often believe workplace communication requires advanced language at all times. In reality, professional strength comes largely from clarity, organization, reliability, and calm delivery. A simple, structured update is more valuable than complicated language that hides the main message. When speaking at work, begin with the purpose. Say what has happened, what matters now, what problem exists, and what action is required. This structure reduces mental load and helps listeners follow you. For example, explain that the project is progressing, identify one delay, describe its cause, and propose the next step. Prepare flexible professional patterns such as, "The main update is," "The issue we are facing is," "The reason for the delay is," "What I recommend is," "Could you clarify," and "The next step will be." These sentence families allow you to communicate effectively without building every structure from the beginning. Professional confidence does not require pretending to understand everything. Ask questions when instructions are unclear, confirm important details, and summarize agreements. You can say, "Just to confirm, you would like this completed by Friday," or "My understanding is that we will review the first version before making the final decision." Clarification prevents mistakes and demonstrates responsibility. When you make an error, correct it without over-apologizing. Say, "I gave the wrong date earlier. The correct date is Monday," and continue. A calm correction often increases trust because it shows awareness and honesty. Repeated apologies may draw more attention to the mistake than necessary. Presentations require another form of stamina because you must carry the structure for a longer period while managing the audience's attention. The secret is not memorizing every word but knowing the sequence deeply enough that you can express each section in different language. Build presentations around clear stages such as the problem, background, evidence, solution, and next steps. Practice each stage separately, then connect them. Prepare the opening and closing more carefully because they create stability, but allow the middle language to remain flexible. Use signposting expressions such as, "Let us begin with," "The next point concerns." A useful example is, "This leads us to," and to summarize the main idea. These phrases guide both you and the audience, reducing the chance that you become lost. If you forget one line during a presentation, return to the main message of the slide or section. The audience does not know the exact sentence you planned, so the missing wording exists only inside your mind. Speak from the idea rather than trying to recover a script nobody else can see. During questions, listen completely before answering, and do not be afraid to pause. You can say, "That is an important question," restate the main issue, and then respond. If you do not know the answer, say what you know, acknowledge what requires checking, and avoid creating false information simply to appear fluent. Communication skill includes intellectual honesty. Interviews can also make the mind go blank because they combine language pressure with personal evaluation. Preparation helps, but memorized answers often become dangerous because the question may be phrased differently. Prepare stories and structures rather than exact scripts. For experience questions, organize your answer around the situation, challenge, action, and result. For opinion questions, state the position, reason, example, and lesson. For future questions, explain the goal, motivation, preparation, and expected contribution. These structures give your mind a route while allowing natural wording. Practice beginning answers without repeating the entire question, and keep the main point visible. A long answer is not automatically a strong answer. Speaking stamina includes knowing how to develop enough detail without losing direction. If the interviewer interrupts or asks for clarification, adapt calmly. Their question is not proof that your English failed. They may simply want more detail. Listen to what they need and respond directly rather than repeating the original answer. Social English requires a different balance because the goal is often connection rather than information. Humor, emotion, reaction, and curiosity may matter more than formal accuracy. Allow your personality to enter the language. Share what surprised you, what you enjoyed, what annoyed you, or what you learned. Many learners sound less natural because they hide their personality behind safe textbook sentences. They communicate facts but not feeling. Instead of saying only, "the trip was good," explain what made it memorable, what went wrong, or what you would do differently. Emotional detail creates stronger communication and gives you more directions for continued speaking. You do not need advanced vocabulary to show personality. Tone, examples, reactions, and honesty can make simple English engaging. A person who says, "I was so nervous that I checked my bag 5 times before leaving," may sound more alive than someone who uses complicated words without a clear story. Humor should develop naturally rather than being forced, but you can become comfortable telling small, embarrassing stories, exaggerating harmless details, or reacting playfully when appropriate. Language becomes more personal when you stop treating every sentence as an academic exercise. You must also become comfortable speaking with people who have different accents, speeds, and communication styles because English belongs to the world, not to one single voice. Real conversations may include native and non-native speakers from many backgrounds, and your listening stamina must become flexible enough to focus on meaning even when pronunciation differs from what you studied. At first, unfamiliar accents may create the feeling that your English has suddenly become weaker, but the difficulty often comes from limited exposure rather than lack of knowledge. Listen to a variety of speakers and focus on recognizing patterns, rhythm, and context. Do not demand complete understanding of every word. Identify the main message and use clarification when necessary. You can say, "I caught the main idea, but could you repeat the last part?" Or, "Did you say that the meeting was moved to Thursday?" This confirms meaning while keeping the conversation active. Do not pretend to understand because fear of clarification often creates larger confusion. Strong communicators protect meaning even when they must ask twice. When someone speaks very quickly, you may request a slower pace politely, especially when details matter. Say, "Could you say that a little more slowly?" This is a practical communication decision, not an admission of failure. You should also remember that different speakers may not understand your accent immediately, even when your grammar is correct. If someone asks you to repeat, do not panic or simply say the same sentence faster. Slow down, emphasize key words, and simplify the structure. Repetition with adjustment is stronger than repetition without change. Pronunciation should serve clarity, not become an attempt to erase your identity. Your goal is not necessarily sounding exactly like one particular native speaker. Your goal is producing sounds, stress, and rhythm clearly enough that listeners can understand without unnecessary effort. Speaking stamina improves when your mouth becomes physically comfortable with common sound combinations, because unclear pronunciation may force you to repeat and increase mental pressure. Include regular shadowing, reading aloud, and phrase repetition in your training, but connect pronunciation with complete meaning rather than isolated sounds alone. Practice useful phrases until the mouth can produce them smoothly, because speaking is partly a physical skill. Your brain may know the sentence, but if your mouth has rarely formed the sounds, delivery feels slow. Repetition creates muscular familiarity, reducing the energy needed for each phrase. However, do not stop speaking every time pronunciation feels imperfect. Continue the message and review the sound later. Real communication cannot wait for laboratory perfection. An anytime speaker also learns how to manage vocabulary gaps intelligently. You will never know every word because language is too large and every field contains specialized terms, but you can build a powerful core vocabulary that supports most daily situations and use description when rare words are missing. Focus on verbs, connectors, question forms, opinion patterns, emotional language, and high-frequency nouns related to your life. Verbs create movement, connectors create organization, and flexible patterns allow one vocabulary item to work across many topics. Instead of learning endless synonyms without use, practice one useful word in several sentence types. Take the word improve and explain what you want to improve, what has improved, what needs improvement, what method improves performance, and why improvement matters. This depth creates faster access than memorizing many words only once. Build vocabulary from experiences. When you face a situation where you could not express something, collect the missing language afterward and use it in several original sentences. This creates strong memory because the vocabulary is attached to a real need. Do not become addicted to collecting language you never produce. A notebook filled with words does not automatically become a fluent voice. Every important expression must travel from recognition into active use through speaking, writing, retrieval, and repetition. You should create personal language banks around your identity, including your work, interests, goals, family, daily routines, challenges, opinions, and experiences. These are the subjects you will discuss most often, so automaticity in these areas creates immediate confidence. For each area, practice a short introduction, a deeper explanation, a personal story, a challenge, an opinion, and a future goal. This gives you multiple layers of speaking material, allowing you to respond briefly or continue for several minutes depending on the situation. Over time, connect the banks together. Your work may connect with your goals with English, English with confidence, confidence with personal growth, and personal growth with past experiences. These connections allow conversations to move naturally without sudden emptiness. Speaking anywhere also requires cultural flexibility because language does not operate in isolation. Different situations may require different levels of formality, directness, politeness, and emotional expression. A sentence that works with a close friend may feel too casual in a professional meeting, while formal textbook language may sound distant during a friendly conversation. Learn several versions of common functions. For requests, you may say, "Give me that," in a very direct setting. "Could you pass me that?" in ordinary, polite conversation. Or would it be possible to send that by tomorrow, in a professional context? The meaning remains related, but the level changes. Do not become afraid of choosing the wrong level. Observe how people communicate in the environment, notice common patterns, and adjust gradually. Pragmatic fluency develops through exposure and experience. Politeness can also protect conversations when vocabulary is limited. Expressions such as, "Could you explain that again?" "I may be mistaken, but from my perspective, and I understand your point," although allow you to communicate disagreement, uncertainty, and requests without creating unnecessary tension. Learning how to disagree is especially important because some learners remain silent whenever they hold a different opinion. They fear that limited English will make them sound rude. You can disagree calmly by acknowledging the other view, stating your perspective, and giving a reason. Say, "I understand why you see it that way, but my experience has been different because..." This structure shows respect while allowing your real voice to appear. Fluency is not only the ability to agree safely, it is the ability to participate honestly. You must also learn how to say that you do not know, do not remember, or are not certain. These are normal communication functions, not failures. Say, "I am not completely sure, but I do not remember the exact detail," or "I would need to check that before giving a confident answer." Such language allows you to remain in the conversation without pretending. An anytime speaker is not someone who has answers for everything. It is someone who can manage what they know, what they do not know, and what they need to clarify. Another major transformation occurs when you stop avoiding difficult topics and begin learning how to stay useful even when your knowledge is limited. You may be asked about economics, technology, culture, education, or a current issue you have not studied deeply. You can still participate by identifying what you understand, asking for context, connecting the topic with general experience, and expressing a careful opinion. You might say, "I have not studied this subject deeply, but one concern I can see is," or "based on what you have explained, it seems that." This allows you to think aloud responsibly without pretending to be an expert. Learning how to handle unfamiliar topics reduces fear because you no longer believe every conversation requires complete preparation. You trust your ability to listen and build a response from available information. Your thinking flexibility matters greatly here. Instead of asking whether you possess the perfect answer, ask what part of the topic you can discuss. You may not understand the technical details, but you can discuss the human impact, possible benefits, concerns, personal experience, or questions that need answering. This method keeps you engaged and turns uncertainty into curiosity. Curiosity is one of the strongest allies of fluency because a curious speaker does not need to carry the entire conversation through personal knowledge. They ask, listen, react, and learn. Every new answer gives them vocabulary, ideas, and another direction. Developing curiosity also reduces self-consciousness because your attention moves toward discovering something rather than proving your level. When you genuinely want to understand the person or topic, English becomes a tool instead of a test. Another essential part of long-term speaking stamina is protecting your motivation from unrealistic expectations. Many learners begin a routine with enormous energy, expect dramatic improvement within a few weeks, and become disappointed when progress feels slower than imagined. They may then stop practicing completely, losing the consistency that would have created the result. Fluency develops unevenly. Some improvements appear quickly, such as becoming comfortable with familiar topics, while deeper changes such as spontaneous flexibility under pressure require many repeated experiences. You may feel unchanged for several weeks and then suddenly notice that a conversation lasted longer, a word appeared faster, or a mistake no longer created panic. These breakthroughs are usually the visible result of invisible work that has been accumulating quietly. Do not mistake delayed evidence for no progress. Measure several areas instead of using one vague question such as, "Am I fluent yet?" Notice how long you can speak, how quickly you begin, how many ideas you can develop, how calmly you recover, how clearly you organize, how well you understand different speakers, and how often you use English in real life. Progress may appear in one area before another. You may still make grammar mistakes while becoming much faster and more confident. You may speak clearly but struggle with unfamiliar accents. You may handle social conversation well but need more professional vocabulary. Fluency is a collection of abilities, not one switch that suddenly turns on. Create monthly speaking records on the same topics and compare them after several months. You may not notice daily change because you hear your own voice constantly, but longer comparisons reveal shorter pauses, stronger structure, clearer pronunciation, and greater depth. Listen with curiosity rather than shame. The older recording is not evidence of weakness, it is evidence of distance traveled. You should also celebrate functional victories that traditional study often ignores. Speaking to a stranger, completing a call, asking a follow-up question, recovering after confusion, expressing disagreement, telling a story, or explaining a problem are major signs that your English is becoming usable. Usable English changes life more than perfect exercise scores. A learner may complete advanced grammar tests but remain silent when communication is needed, while another learner with simpler language creates opportunities because they are willing and able to speak. Your goal is not only knowledge, it is access, courage, flexibility, and real-world function. At the same time, do not use fluency practice as an excuse to ignore accuracy forever. As speaking becomes more comfortable, identify repeated errors that affect clarity and improve them through focused study. The difference is that you now correct from inside an active speaking life rather than waiting for perfection before using the language. Choose one recurring pattern, understand the correction, create several personal examples, and deliberately use the structure during speaking. This connects knowledge with production. For pronunciation, choose one sound or stress pattern and practice it inside useful phrases. For vocabulary, choose a small group of expressions and use them across several topics. For organization, practice one structure such as past, present, future, or problem, cause, solution. Focus creates lasting change. Trying to correct everything at once creates self-monitoring overload, while focused improvement allows fluency and accuracy to grow together. You must also give yourself permission to develop a personal English voice. Many learners spend so much time copying teachers, native speakers, or textbook dialogues that they never ask how they naturally want to communicate. Your voice includes the topics you care about, the stories you tell, the humor you use, the values you express, and the rhythm that feels comfortable. Imitation is useful for pronunciation, structure, and style, but the final goal is not becoming a copy of another person. It is becoming more fully yourself through another language. When your personal voice appears, speaking becomes easier because you are no longer performing a character. You are expressing real meaning that already belongs to you. Choose topics that matter deeply enough to create emotional energy. Explain your ambitions, lessons, fears, beliefs, mistakes, and hopes. The stronger your relationship with the message, the more naturally you search for a way to communicate it. This does not mean every conversation must be deep. It means English should become capable of carrying your real identity rather than only memorized classroom information. You may initially feel that your personality becomes smaller in English because you cannot express every shade of humor, emotion, or intelligence available in your first language. This feeling is common, but it changes as your expressive range grows. Do not conclude that the quieter English version of you is permanent. Every story you learn to tell, every opinion you express, and every emotional phrase you use gives your English identity more depth. Eventually, you stop feeling like a simplified version of yourself and begin feeling present as a complete person. Patience is essential because personality requires more than functional vocabulary. It requires confidence with timing, tone, nuance, and interaction, all of which develop through repeated communication. You should also become comfortable with silence that belongs naturally inside conversation. Speaking stamina does not mean filling every second with words because meaningful communication includes listening, thinking, reacting, and allowing ideas to settle. A speaker who fears every pause may rush, repeat, or speak without direction. Learn the difference between a calm pause and a fearful shutdown. A calm pause keeps you connected, while a shutdown makes you mentally escape. During a calm pause, maintain attention, breathe, and prepare the next idea. You may use a brief phrase when necessary, but you do not need to apologize for thinking. Confident speakers often use pauses to create emphasis and clarity. Slowing down before an important point may make the message stronger. Pausing after a complex idea gives the listener time to understand. Your goal is not endless speed, it is controlled continuity. The same principle applies to silence after you ask a question. Do not immediately answer for the other person because you are uncomfortable. Give them time to think. Communication becomes more balanced when both speakers have space. An anytime speaker also knows how to exit a conversation naturally because stamina includes control over beginnings, development, and endings. Learners sometimes remain trapped in conversations because they do not know how to conclude politely, while others end suddenly because their English energy has disappeared. You can summarize the exchange, express appreciation, mention a next action, or explain that you need to leave. Say, "It was great hearing about your experience. I should get back to work, but I enjoyed our conversation," or "Thank you for explaining that. I will review the information and respond tomorrow." Knowing how to end reduces anxiety because you understand that you can close the interaction before complete exhaustion. You are not trapped until your English fails. This is especially useful during early exposure training. Choose shorter, successful conversations and end while you still feel in control. Positive endings create better memories than forcing yourself to continue until panic takes over. As stamina grows, allow conversations to become longer and less predictable, but keep the ability to conclude clearly. Your English must also survive moments of misunderstanding because no speaker is understood perfectly in every interaction. The listener may miss your pronunciation, interpret the sentence differently, or lack context. Learners often experience misunderstanding as personal rejection, but communication breakdowns happen between fluent speakers as well. When someone looks confused, do not automatically repeat the same sentence with greater speed. Identify the main message and express it differently. Shorten the sentence, emphasize the key word, give an example, or explain the background. Say, "Let me explain that another way," and rebuild the meaning. This phrase changes misunderstanding from failure into collaboration. You can also check understanding by asking, "Does that make sense?" or "Am I explaining that clearly?" In professional contexts, confirm the final agreement or action. When you misunderstand the listener, ask targeted questions instead of saying only, "What?" You may ask, "Do you mean the first meeting or the second one?" Or, "Are you asking about the cost or the schedule?" Specific clarification shows active listening and resolves confusion faster. Every successful repair strengthens speaking stamina because you learn that communication does not require perfect first attempts. Meaning can be negotiated, corrected, and rebuilt. You must also accept that some conversations will remain difficult because of the topic, environment, accent, or personality of the other person. Do not use the hard hardest interaction as the only measurement of your ability. Even fluent speakers connect easily with some people and struggle with others. Language ability exists inside relationships and conditions. A supportive listener may help you speak more confidently, while an impatient person may increase pressure. Recognize the difference without surrendering responsibility for improvement. Seek enough supportive communication to build confidence, but do not remain forever inside environments where everyone adjusts completely to you. Gradually include more challenging interactions so your flexibility grows. If someone behaves rudely because of your accent or mistakes, that behavior reflects their character, not the value of your effort. Learn what is useful from the interaction, protect your confidence, and continue developing with people who respect communication. Your progress should not depend on receiving approval from every listener. Another powerful stage is learning to use English for action rather than practice alone. Book something, request information, solve a customer service problem, explain directions, participate in a meeting, join a community, or teach someone a simple idea. Action creates a stronger memory because the language achieves a real outcome. When English helps you accomplish something, your brain begins trusting it as a functional tool. The language stops being a subject you are rehearsing and becomes part of your ability to move through the world. Begin with small actions and increase responsibility. Ask a question online, leave an English voice message, join a short call, contribute one idea during a meeting, or explain a process to someone. Do not wait until you feel advanced enough for meaningful use. Meaningful use is one of the things that makes you advanced. Teaching is especially powerful because explaining something forces you to organize knowledge, simplify language, anticipate questions, and remain with one topic for longer. You can teach a simple skill, summarize something you learned, or explain an idea to an imaginary beginner. When you teach, your focus moves away from proving your English and toward helping the listener understand. This purpose often creates stronger flow. You do not need to be an expert. Teach something you know well, whether it is a recipe, work process, study method, hobby, or life lesson. Record yourself explaining it, then repeat the explanation more clearly. Each repetition develops structure, vocabulary, and confidence. Another way to build real-world stamina is problem-solving aloud. Choose a real decision or challenge and reason through it in English. Explain the situation, possible options, advantages, risks, and final choice. This trains language for higher-level thinking because you are not simply describing facts. You are comparing, predicting, evaluating, and deciding. Begin with ordinary problems such as organizing time, choosing between two purchases, planning a trip, or improving a habit. Later, discuss more complex professional or personal decisions. Thinking through real problems gives English a practical role inside your inner life, deepening the connection between thought and speech. You can also use English for emotional processing by describing feelings, identifying causes, and deciding what response would be helpful. This must be done honestly but carefully because emotional language creates strong memory. Say what happened, how it affected you, what you wish had been different, and what you can control next. This develops expressive fluency and prevents English from remaining emotionally empty. The more areas of life English can carry, the more available it becomes anytime and anywhere. However, do not force English into every second of the day until learning becomes exhausting. A sustainable identity includes balance. Choose meaningful times for English and allow rest. Consistency is stronger when it can survive months and years. Some learners become extremely intense for a short period, thinking only in English, studying for hours, and judging every native language thought, but eventually the pressure creates burnout. Your goal is not punishing yourself into fluency. It is building a relationship with English that can continue. Daily contact matters, but the form can change. Some days may include deep speaking practice, while others include a brief reflection, voice note, or conversation. Protect the habit without demanding the same performance every day. Stamina grows through challenge and recovery. Rest allows the brain to consolidate learning and return with energy. Your routine should be strong enough to create progress and flexible enough to survive real life. Create a minimum speaking promise that you can keep even on busy days, such as 2 minutes of spoken reflection, 1 answered question, or 1 English voice note. On better days, complete a longer workout. The minimum protects identity. You remain someone who uses English regularly even when circumstances are difficult. Avoid the belief that a short session has no value. 2 minutes may seem small, but it keeps retrieval active, reduces the resistance to beginning, and often grows into more practice once you start. The most important session is sometimes not the longest one, but the one that prevents you from disappearing from the language for another week. You should also prepare for plateaus, because there will be periods when your speaking feels unchanged despite continued practice. A plateau does not necessarily mean nothing is happening. The brain may be consolidating patterns that have not yet become visible. During plateaus, vary the challenge rather than abandoning the routine. Change topics, environments, partners, or speaking structures. Focus on a specific weakness. Record longer samples. Introduce unfamiliar content. Sometimes progress feels blocked because practice has become too comfortable. You may speak for 10 minutes every day about the same familiar topics without challenging vocabulary, organization, or pressure. The routine remains active, but adaptation slows. Increase one dimension carefully. Speak without preparation, discuss a more complex topic, join a group, explain an idea professionally, or practice with a faster speaker. Do not increase every difficulty together. One controlled challenge gives the brain a clear direction. At other times, progress feels blocked because the challenge is too high. You may repeatedly choose topics beyond your vocabulary, enter stressful conversations, and finish feeling defeated. Reduce difficulty temporarily, rebuild successful experiences, and then progress again. Intelligent training moves between comfort and challenge. Comfort builds flow, while challenge builds growth. You should learn to recognize when you need expansion and when you need consolidation. Expansion means learning new language, topics, and situations. Consolidation means repeating and strengthening what you already know until access becomes automatic. Many learners constantly expand without consolidating, creating a large but slow knowledge system. Others consolidate only familiar language and stop growing. Fluency requires both. A useful cycle is learning a small amount of new language, using it across several speaking sessions, applying it in real communication, and reviewing it later. This cycle turns input into active ability. Your listening and reading should feed speaking rather than remain separate worlds. After consuming English content, explain it, react to it, question it, compare it with your experience, and use one or two new expressions. This active transformation teaches your brain that language received through the ears and eyes can become language produced through the mouth. Do not attempt to copy every new expression. Choose those that match your life and communication style. Useful language becomes automatic more easily than language collected only because it sounds advanced. You should also notice the difference between familiarity and mastery. A phrase may feel familiar when you hear it, but mastery means you can produce it naturally in a new situation without preparation. Test mastery through use. Can you create several original sentences? Can you include the phrase during a story or opinion? Can you retrieve it days later? If not, the phrase is still passive and needs more active contact. An anytime speaker gradually transforms passive language into active language until the gap between understanding and speaking becomes smaller. The gap may never disappear completely because everyone understands more than they regularly use even in a first language, but your active core can become large and flexible enough to handle real life confidently. Another important principle is emotional neutrality toward temporary regression. After a break, illness, stress, or busy period, your English may feel slower. Do not conclude that everything has been lost. Skills become less accessible when unused, but they usually return faster than they were originally built. Restart gently. Use familiar topics, short recordings, and simple structures. Allow your brain to reopen the pathways without demanding immediate peak performance. The worst response is shame, because shame may extend a short break into months of avoidance. Treat return as normal. Every long-term learner will experience interruptions. Your identity survives the interruption. You are still an English speaker returning to practice, not a failure beginning from zero. This resilient identity is what allows progress to continue across years. You must also protect yourself from comparing your private struggle with another person's public performance. Online, you may see learners who appear naturally confident, speakers with excellent accents, or people who claim dramatic progress in a short time. You rarely see their full background, years of exposure, private practice, mistakes, or advantages. Comparison can be useful only when it produces a specific lesson. Notice a skill you admire, study how it works, and add a realistic version to your practice. Do not transform someone else's performance into evidence against your own potential. Your relevant comparison is between your current ability and your earlier limits. Could you once speak for only 30 seconds but now continue for 3 minutes? Do you recover faster? Do you translate less? Can you express opinions that once remained trapped? These are real changes. Another person's speed does not reduce the value of your progress. Language learning is not a race where only the first person gains fluency. Your background, time, exposure, responsibilities, and emotional history are different. Build the strongest system possible inside your own life. You should also reconsider what you believe fluent English sounds like. Fluency does not always mean a perfect accent, advanced vocabulary, fast speech, or complete grammatical accuracy. A fluent speaker communicates smoothly enough for the situation, adapts when difficulty appears, and remains connected with the listener. Someone may speak quickly but unclearly, use advanced words incorrectly, or sound memorized. Another person may speak at a moderate pace with simple vocabulary but express complex ideas clearly and respond naturally. Choose functional fluency over performance fluency. Functional fluency gives you freedom. You can continue refining accent, vocabulary, style, and accuracy, but these improvements should grow on top of a strong foundation of communication. The deepest sign of progress is not sounding impressive during a prepared recording. It is forgetting to think about English because you are fully engaged in the idea. There will be moments when you finish a conversation and realize you were not translating, monitoring, or counting time. You were simply communicating. These moments may appear briefly at first, then grow longer and more frequent. Do not chase them with pressure because too much self-awareness can make them disappear. Continue building the conditions: regular use, automatic patterns, emotional safety, and meaningful conversation. Flow is not forced. It emerges when skill and attention meet a clear purpose. Your work is to become ready for flow through consistent training. An anytime speaker also learns to handle sudden questions without panic. The mind may need a few seconds, and you are allowed to take them. Begin by acknowledging the question, identifying your main response, and developing it. You may say, "I have not thought about that before, but my first reaction is," or "there are several sides to that question." These beginnings create space while showing engagement. Use a simple structure instead of searching for a perfect answer. State what you think, explain one reason, give an example, and conclude. A clear, moderate answer is stronger than a long, confused one. You can train sudden response stamina by creating random question cards or using a timer. Give yourself a few seconds to think, then speak for 1 or 2 minutes. Choose questions across personal, professional, social, and abstract topics. The purpose is not expert knowledge, but flexible response. Over time, surprise becomes less threatening because your mind trusts familiar speaking structures. You should also practice changing your opinion while speaking because real thought is not always complete before language begins. You may start with one view and realize another point matters. Fluent speakers can adjust without feeling embarrassed. Say, "The more I think about it, the more I realize," or "I should add that there is another side." This shows intellectual flexibility. You do not need to defend the first sentence forever simply because it was spoken. Communication allows development. Similarly, you may correct factual details, add forgotten information, or clarify your intention. These changes do not weaken your fluency. They demonstrate control. An anytime speaker is flexible enough to think in public. Another advanced ability is adapting the length of your response to the situation. A question from a cashier requires a different answer from an interview question. A friend may enjoy a detailed story, while a busy colleague needs the main point quickly. Speaking stamina does not mean speaking as long as possible every time. It means having enough control to speak briefly or deeply as needed. Practice giving 30-second, 2-minute, and 5-minute versions of the same topic. This teaches you to identify the core message and choose the appropriate detail. For a 30-second version, state the main idea and one reason. For 2 minutes, add explanation and example. For 5 minutes, include background, comparison, reflection, and conclusion. This flexibility is highly valuable because real communication constantly changes. You should also learn how to summarize because summarization protects clarity during long speaking. After explaining several points, return to the center by saying, The main idea is, or so what this means is. A summary helps the listener and reminds your own mind where the conversation is going. It prevents long speech from becoming a collection of unrelated sentences. During practice, stop every few minutes and summarize what you have said in 1 or 2 sentences. This strengthens organization and prepares you for presentations, meetings, and discussions. Clear speakers know not only how to expand but also how to compress. The ability to compress demonstrates that you understand your own message. Another skill is verbal signposting, where you tell the listener how ideas relate. Use expressions that mark cause, contrast, example, sequence, and conclusion. These signals reduce the amount of work the listener must perform and make your speech sound controlled. Do not overuse formal connectors in casual conversation, but develop enough variety that your thoughts do not sound disconnected. A strong speaker may say the first reason, another factor, at the same time, a good example, and because of that. These simple phrases can carry a long explanation effectively. Practice them until they appear automatically, then allow more natural variation to develop through exposure. You should also develop repair language for pronunciation. When the listener does not understand a word, you can repeat slowly, place it inside a simpler sentence, spell it when appropriate, or use another term. For names, addresses, codes, or technical information, spelling may be necessary. Learn how to say letters and numbers clearly because these practical details often create more stress than general conversation. Practice phone numbers, dates, email addresses, and common names aloud. Functional fluency includes small technical abilities that make real-world tasks easier. Do not ignore these areas because they seem less interesting. Confidence often grows through successful practical interactions. The same is true for turn-taking language. Learn how to enter, hold, and release a conversational turn. To enter, say, "Could I add something?" To hold while organizing, say, "There are 2 parts to this." To release, ask, "What do you think?" These signals create smoother interaction and reduce uncertainty about when to speak. In online meetings, slight delays can make turn-taking harder, so use clearer verbal signals and avoid interpreting every overlap personally. Mute and unmute confidently. Begin with the person's name when necessary and state your point early. Speaking anywhere includes digital environments where camera awareness, connection delays, and audio quality create additional pressure. Practice looking toward the camera, speaking in shorter sections, and checking understanding. Technology can fail, and you should prepare calm language such as, "Your audio broke up for a moment. I think there is a slight delay," or "Could you repeat the last sentence?" Technical problems are not language failures. Treat them practically. Another form of stamina is academic speaking, where you must explain definitions, compare theories, discuss evidence, and respond carefully. Use structures that support precision without forcing unnecessarily complicated language. Define the central idea, explain the context, present the main argument, give evidence or example, and acknowledge limitations. Academic confidence comes from understanding an organization more than decorative vocabulary. When unsure, avoid absolute claims. Use language such as, "This suggests," "One possible explanation is," or "The evidence appears to show." These patterns allow thoughtful communication. You can practice academic stamina by summarizing lectures, explaining a concept as if teaching a beginner, comparing 2 ideas, and answering possible questions. Again, the purpose is not memorizing complete paragraphs, but developing roots through complex meaning. Your speaking stamina becomes powerful when you can move across social, professional, academic, and personal contexts while adjusting style without losing identity. This flexibility takes time, but every context strengthens the others. Storytelling improves presentations, professional structure improves opinions, clarification improves social conversation, and emotional expression makes formal speech more human. Do not divide English into completely separate boxes. Transfer skills across situations. Another deep transformation happens when you become less afraid of being visible. Speaking a new language exposes uncertainty, and many learners prefer remaining silent because silence protects the image of intelligence. When you speak, people may hear hesitation or mistakes, and this vulnerability feels uncomfortable. However, silence protects the image at the cost of growth. You cannot become a confident speaker while hiding every imperfect stage. Courage means allowing yourself to be seen learning. It means trusting that your worth is larger than the quality of one sentence. A mistake does not reduce your intelligence. An accent does not erase your knowledge. A pause does not remove your experience. The listener hears only one moment of your English, not the full story of your effort, ability, or character. Do not give one moment the power to define you. As you speak more often, visibility becomes normal, and the fear of being evaluated slowly decreases because you discover that most conversations move forward quickly. People rarely remember the exact mistake that felt enormous to you. What they often remember is whether you were kind, clear, interested, prepared, or helpful. Let your human qualities support your English. Warmth, patience, curiosity, and honesty can make communication successful even when language is imperfect. You should also understand that confidence is relational. With supportive people, your English may flow more easily because your nervous system feels safe. Use these relationships as training grounds, but do not become dependent on constant reassurance. Ask supportive partners to allow you time, avoid correcting every sentence during conversation, and give focused feedback afterward. This protects flow while still supporting improvement. When you are ready, practice with people who speak at natural speed and do not know your usual patterns. This introduces healthy unpredictability, balance, safety, and challenge. An English-speaking community can accelerate progress because regular interaction creates accountability, topic variety, and social meaning. Join groups connected to your interests rather than language alone, because discussing a genuine hobby, profession, or goal often creates stronger motivation than generic conversation exercises. When English is the bridge towards something you care about, you stop measuring every sentence and begin participating. Start as an observer when necessary, then contribute small comments, questions, or voice messages. Increase involvement gradually. Belonging can transform identity because you no longer see English as an individual struggle. It becomes a shared space where communication has purpose. However, do not compare yourself constantly with stronger members. Learn from them, notice useful language, and continue contributing at your level. Participation itself is training. You can also create accountability through a speaking journal. Instead of writing only, record a daily or weekly entry describing what happened, what you learned, what challenged you, and what comes next. Over time, these recordings become a powerful record of growth and a library of personal topics. Repeat important experiences several times from different angles. Tell what happened, explain how you felt, identify the lesson, and discuss what you would do differently. This transforms life into speaking material. You will never truly run out of topics because your days continually produce decisions, reactions, plans, memories, and observations. Learners often say they have nothing to speak about, but the problem is usually not the absence of life, it is the absence of a habit of noticing. Train yourself to notice one interesting moment each day. It may be a conversation, problem, surprise, mistake, idea, or change. Later, speak about it. Attention creates content. And anytime speaker develops a storyteller's awareness, recognizing that ordinary events contain characters, expectations, challenges, reactions, and lessons. A delayed bus can become a story about patience. A difficult task can become a reflection on discipline. A small misunderstanding can become a lesson about communication. Your life is already full of English practice material. You should also speak about positive experiences, not only problems, because joy, gratitude, excitement, and pride build emotional range. Describe what went well, why it mattered, and how you want to continue. Balanced expression helps English become connected with the full human experience. Another powerful practice is future rehearsal, where you imagine an upcoming situation and speak through it in several possible ways. Before a meeting, explain your update. Before traveling, practice asking for information. Before an interview, tell your stories. Before meeting someone, prepare a few questions. Future rehearsal reduces uncertainty, but remain flexible. The real event will not follow the script perfectly, and that is acceptable. Prepare the functions you may need rather than exact sentences. You may need to introduce yourself, clarify, disagree, request, explain, and conclude. When these functions are ready, you can adapt to different wording. After the event, perform a reflection. Explain what happened, what language worked, where you struggled, and what you would change. This before and after cycle turns every real interaction into accelerated training. You can also mentally replay difficult moments with a better response, not to attack yourself but to build a new pathway. Say what you wish you had said, using simpler and clearer language. The next time a similar situation appears, your brain will have a prepared route. Be careful not to replay mistakes emotionally for hours. One constructive rehearsal is useful, while endless regret only strengthens fear. Extract the lesson, practice the solution, and move forward. An anytime speaker learns quickly from experience without living permanently inside it. You must also develop tolerance for incomplete understanding. During fast conversations, you may miss words but still understand enough to respond. Learners often panic when comprehension is not 100%, causing them to lose the rest of the message. Focus on key words, context, tone, and the speaker's purpose. Ask yourself what action or response is needed. If the missing information matters, clarify. If it does not affect the main meaning, continue. Even native speakers miss words because of noise, distraction, or unfamiliar references. Communication does not require perfect reception. Listening stamina grows when you remain calm inside partial understanding. Expose yourself to natural speech gradually, beginning with clear content and moving toward faster, less predictable interaction. Use transcripts for review, but do not depend on them during every first listen. Practice summarizing what you understood rather than focusing only on what you missed. This builds confidence in meaning. You should also train your response to unfamiliar vocabulary. When someone uses a word you do not know, do not immediately abandon the conversation. Use context, ask for meaning, or request an example. Say, "What does that word mean in this context?" or "Could you give me an example?" This turns confusion into learning. If the word is not central, continue and review it later. Fluent participation does not require understanding every rare term. Another advanced skill is managing emotional conversations where strong feelings make language access harder. In conflict, disappointment, or serious discussion, slow down and prioritize clarity. Shorter sentences reduce the risk of saying something unintended. State what happened, how it affected you, and what you need next. Avoid building long, complicated sentences while emotions are intense. You can say, "I want to explain this clearly," and take a moment before continuing. Ask for clarification rather than making assumptions, and summarize the other person's point to confirm understanding. Emotional fluency includes knowing when to pause the conversation and return later. Speaking stamina is not forcing language through every emotional state, it is managing communication wisely. Prepare language for boundaries, apologies, appreciation, and difficult requests because these functions matter deeply in real life. An apology can be simple and responsible. Acknowledge the action, recognize the effect, and explain the correction. Appreciation can be specific. Explain what the person did and why it mattered. These moments create meaningful language memories because they are connected with relationships. You will feel more like a complete English speaker when the language can carry not only information but also respect, care, disagreement, regret, and gratitude. Your final goal is not speaking longer merely to produce more sound. It is sustaining meaningful communication with control. Long speaking without direction can become tiring for both speaker and listener. Stamina must include judgment: when to expand, when to summarize, when to ask, when to listen, when to change the topic, and when to finish. This communicative intelligence grows through experience. Notice how effective speakers manage energy. They vary sentence length, pause, react, tell stories, ask questions, and emphasize important points. They do not speak at one speed or intensity forever. You can develop similar control without copying their personality. Observe patterns and adapt them to your voice. Record yourself and listen not only for mistakes but for listener experience. Is the main point clear? Are ideas connected? Does the story have enough context? Are you repeating without purpose? Are you leaving space to breathe? This perspective moves you from sentence production toward communication design. However, do not analyze every recording so deeply that practice becomes exhausting. Choose one or two focus areas each time. Some sessions should be purely for flow and enjoyment. Enjoyment is not a distraction from progress. It is one of the forces that makes long-term consistency possible. Speak about books, films, dreams, humor, travel, ideas, or anything that makes you forget the timer. The moments when you enjoy English create strong positive associations, encouraging your brain to return. You should also allow yourself to play with language. Invent stories, imagine impossible situations, describe a future life, debate with yourself, or create characters. Creative speaking removes the pressure of factual accuracy and strengthens flexibility. Ask what you would do if you had a year free, how life would change without smartphones, or what advice you would give your younger self. Imagination creates endless directions and prepares you for unexpected topics. Another playful method is changing perspective. Tell the same story as yourself, another person, or an observer. Describe an event from the beginning, then from the ending backward. These challenges strengthen mental agility and make ordinary conversation feel easier. Speaking stamina is not only endurance, it is adaptability. You should also practice explaining the same idea to different listeners, such as a child, friend, colleague, or expert. Change vocabulary, detail, and tone. This develops audience awareness and deepens your control over meaning. If you can explain a complicated idea simply, you truly understand it. The ability to adapt explanations is valuable across teaching, leadership, work, and relationships. Over time, you will notice that English begins appearing before translation. A reaction, phrase, or complete sentence may rise directly from the situation. Do not interrupt this process by translating it backward to check whether it is perfect. Trust the direct thought when the meaning is clear. The more often direct English succeeds, the stronger the pathway becomes. Translation may still appear with difficult or emotional ideas, and that is normal. The goal is not violently eliminating your first language. It is giving English enough independent experience that it can function without constant support. Your languages do not need to fight. Your first language is part of your intelligence, and English becomes another tool. Avoid feeling guilty when translation appears. Simply return to direct expression through smaller thoughts. Identity becomes stronger through acceptance, not constant internal conflict. You are not betraying one language by developing another. You are expanding your capacity to connect. Another change will occur in your dreams, internal dialogue, or spontaneous reactions, but these signs are not required for fluency. Do not wait for dramatic proof. Functional communication matters more than symbolic milestones. Some learners think fluency has arrived only when they think entirely in English, but even advanced multilingual speakers move between languages depending on context. Your goal is flexibility and access, not forcing the mind into one permanent language. Measure whether English appears when needed and whether you can remain inside it long enough to accomplish the purpose. That is speaking stamina. You must also prepare for moments when people praise your English, because learners sometimes dismiss compliments immediately by saying, "No, my English is terrible." This response may come from humility or fear, but it reinforces a negative identity. Accept the compliment simply. Say, "Thank you, I have been practicing," and continue. You can recognize that improvement remains while still respecting your progress. Similarly, when someone corrects you, separate the correction from your worth. Listen, confirm, repeat the improved form when useful, and move forward. Not every correction is accurate or necessary, so consider the context but do not become defensive automatically. A helpful correction can save years of repeating the same pattern. Ask trusted teachers or partners for focused feedback rather than constant interruption. You may request feedback on clarity, pronunciation, organization, or one grammar area. Specific feedback produces action. General statements such as "My English is bad" produce nothing. After feedback, choose one practical adjustment and use it during several sessions. Improvement becomes manageable when it is specific. Another part of long-term identity is recognizing your right to take up conversational space. Some learners speak quietly, shorten every answer, and apologize repeatedly because they feel their English is less valuable than another person's. Your ideas do not become less meaningful because they are expressed in a second language. Speak clearly enough to be heard, maintain eye contact when culturally appropriate, and finish your main point. Confidence is not arrogance. It is respecting the message enough to communicate it. You can be humble about your level while still participating fully. Do not begin every contribution with an apology such as "My English is very bad, but..." This prepares both you and the listener to focus on weakness. Begin with the idea. When clarification is needed, handle it calmly. The more often you speak without apologizing for existing, the stronger your identity becomes. You should also practice volume and projection, because a weak voice can make clear English difficult to understand and may increase your own feeling of uncertainty. Breathe, open your mouth, and direct the voice toward the listener. Speaking louder does not mean shouting. It means giving the words enough energy to travel. Record at different distances, and notice whether your speech remains clear. Physical posture can support voice and confidence. Sit or stand with enough openness to breathe comfortably. Release unnecessary tension in the jaw and shoulders. The body influences the mind, and a restricted body can make speech feel more difficult. Before speaking, a brief physical reset may help. Breathe, relax, and focus outward. These small adjustments support the larger skill. Your stamina also depends on topic transitions. Real conversations do not stay in one subject forever, and you need language that connects ideas naturally. Use personal connection, similarity, contrast, time, or cause. Say, "That reminds me of a similar thing happened," on a different note, or because of that experience. Do not change topics so frequently that the conversation feels scattered. Develop the current idea, recognize when it is complete, then create a bridge. Topic control prevents both emptiness and endless repetition. You can practice by choosing 5 related topics and moving through them in one recording. For example, begin with work, connect it to skills, skills to English, English to confidence, and confidence to future goals. The transitions teach your mind to create continuity across changing content. Another valuable practice is collaborative storytelling, where you and a partner build a story by adding one part at a time. This trains listening, adaptation, and spontaneous creation. You cannot prepare everything because each new part depends on the other person. The exercise becomes a safe version of real unpredictability. You can also practice collaborative problem solving, where you discuss options and reach a decision together. These activities develop interaction more deeply than individual speeches alone. Solo practice builds production, but partnership practice builds negotiation. You need both. Speaking with stronger speakers may initially feel intimidating, but it can accelerate learning if the environment is respectful. Listen for useful structures, ask questions, and avoid comparing every sentence. A stronger speaker may offer natural input and challenge you to respond at a higher level. Tell them your goal when appropriate, such as improving conversation flow rather than receiving constant grammar correction. Choose partners who allow genuine exchange rather than turning every interaction into a lesson. You need opportunities to be a person, not only a student. Speaking with learners at a similar level is also valuable because you may feel freer to experiment and both people understand the challenge. Do not believe only native speakers can help you. Skilled non-native speakers often understand the learning process deeply and can model achievable strategies. Diverse interaction creates flexible English. You should also practice explaining your culture, traditions, food, values, and local experiences because these subjects often appear in international conversations. They allow you to share something meaningful and develop vocabulary connected to identity. Prepare clear descriptions without assuming the listener already understands the background. Explain context, significance, and personal experience. Be willing to answer respectful questions and ask about the other person's culture. These exchanges make English a bridge rather than a performance. When discussing sensitive differences, use careful language, curiosity, and respect. Avoid assuming one experience represents everyone. This develops mature communication. An anytime speaker learns not only how to produce English but how to build understanding across differences. You should also build the skill of explaining humor, idioms, and local expressions because direct translation may not work. Describe the meaning and situation rather than forcing an exact equivalent. This strengthens paraphrasing and cultural awareness. Similarly, when you hear an unfamiliar idiom, ask what it means and notice the context. Do not rush to use every idiom immediately. Natural language grows through appropriate use, not decorative collection. Your core strength should remain clear, flexible English. Another long-term skill is self-correction without interruption. As you become more aware, you may notice mistakes while speaking. Correct only when the meaning is affected or the pattern is important. Say the corrected form briefly and continue. Avoid repeating the entire sentence many times. This keeps attention on communication while still supporting accuracy. During practice, you can choose sessions where you allow more self-correction and others where you protect uninterrupted flow. Separating these goals prevents overload. Fluent speakers constantly balance monitoring and momentum, often without conscious effort. Your balance will improve through experience. You should also stop expecting every sentence to sound advanced. Natural speech contains many simple structures, repeated words, and unfinished thoughts. Advanced fluency means using language appropriately, not making every sentence complex. A clear sentence such as, "I changed my mind because I learned more about the situation," may be more effective than an unnecessarily complicated alternative. Complexity should serve meaning. As your control grows, use longer structures when they allow useful relationships between ideas, but do not use them to prove your level. The listener cares about understanding. Your deepest confidence will come when you no longer need every sentence to demonstrate intelligence. Another important stage is tolerating accent identity. Your pronunciation may contain traces of your first language, and that is not automatically a problem. Many effective international speakers have identifiable accents. Focus on intelligibility, stress, rhythm, and sounds that frequently cause misunderstanding. Do not spend so much energy chasing an impossible idea of accent perfection that you avoid real communication. Your accent can improve through regular practice, but your voice does not need to become someone else's voice before it deserves to be heard. Confidence itself often improves pronunciation because relaxed speech allows clearer movement and better rhythm. Fear can make the mouth tight and the voice weak. Work on clarity while protecting self-respect. You should also develop patience with listeners who need a moment to adjust to your accent. Rephrase when needed and continue. Communication is shared work. Another powerful sign of identity is using English spontaneously without creating a formal practice event. You may comment on something, think aloud, send a message, ask a question, or explain a plan naturally. Encourage these small, spontaneous uses because they show that English is entering ordinary life. Do not dismiss them because they last only seconds. Every spontaneous moment weakens the old belief that English requires special preparation. The goal of the 30-second challenge was never merely reaching 10 minutes in a recording. It was removing the mental wall that tells you English must stop when easy preparation ends. Every spontaneous sentence proves that the wall is weakening. As these moments accumulate, speaking becomes less dramatic. You no longer need to announce to yourself that you are about to practice English. You simply use it. This normality is one of the highest forms of progress. You should create opportunities rather than waiting for them. Change one part of your routine into English, join a discussion, respond to content aloud, or begin a weekly call. Environment often shapes behavior more strongly than motivation. Place English where it becomes easy to use. Keep topic prompts visible, save voice note shortcuts, and schedule conversations. Reduce the friction of beginning. A person who relies only on willpower may speak inconsistently, while a person who designs regular opportunities makes progress more reliable. Identity becomes stronger when the environment supports it. At the same time, remain adaptable when plans change. If a conversation is canceled, complete a solo speaking session. If you cannot record privately, think through short responses quietly. If energy is low, complete the minimum promise. Do not let imperfect conditions become permission to disappear. Consistency is not following one exact plan. It is maintaining contact through changing circumstances. This flexibility is another form of stamina. You may also experience periods when speaking feels emotionally heavy because you are tired of hearing your own mistakes. During these periods, reconnect with meaning and enjoyment. Speak about something you love, communicate with a supportive person, or revisit an older recording that shows progress. Remember why English matters to you. Goals such as career, travel, education, connection, confidence, or creative expression provide direction when routine alone feels empty. However, do not wait for intense motivation. Let purpose guide the system, while habit carries the ordinary days. A strong identity does not depend on feeling inspired every morning. It depends on knowing that English is part of the life you are building. You should also allow goals to evolve. The reason you began learning may not be the same reason you continue. Perhaps you started for work but discovered enjoyment in books, travel, or international friendships. Update your goals so practice remains meaningful. Choose speaking activities connected to current needs. If your goal is leadership, practice explaining decisions and giving feedback. If it is travel, practice practical interactions and stories. If it is content creation, practice narration, structure, and audience engagement. Specific purpose creates focused stamina. Yet keep some general conversation because life will always contain unexpected topics. Balance specialization with flexibility. Another major transformation comes when you begin solving language problems independently. Instead of concluding that you cannot express something, you search for examples, check usage, practice the phrase, and return to the idea. This problem-solving identity replaces helplessness with curiosity. Keep a list of speaking gaps discovered during real use. Review a few each week, not hundreds at once. For each gap, learn a natural expression, create personal examples, and use it in a recording or conversation. The problem becomes material for growth. Your weakest moments become the map for your strongest progress. Do not hide from them. The same method works for repeated grammar errors. Notice the pattern, study the difference, create contrastive examples, and use the correct form deliberately. Then return to natural speaking and allow automation to develop. Independent learning gives you confidence that future gaps are manageable. You do not need to know everything now because you know how to learn what you need. This is a powerful form of fluency. An anytime speaker also develops intellectual flexibility by reading and listening across topics because stronger content knowledge creates more ideas to express. Speaking stamina weakens when the mind has no material, even if language ability is sufficient. Expose yourself to stories, interviews, explanations, and discussions that genuinely interest you. Afterward, process them actively through English. Ask whether you agree, what surprised you, what the idea connects with, and how you would explain it to someone else. This creates both content and language. Fluent speakers are often strong thinkers not because English itself created intelligence, but because they have ideas, experiences, and curiosity to carry through language. Develop your mind alongside your English. Do not reduce fluency to sentence mechanics alone. The strongest conversations happen when language and thought grow together. You can practice deeper thinking through why, how, comparison, consequence, limitation, and alternative questions. After stating an opinion, ask why you hold it. Then ask what evidence supports it, what opposing view exists, and what could change your mind. This produces richer speaking and prevents repetition. Even simple vocabulary can carry complex thinking when ideas are organized clearly. You do not need advanced words before you are allowed to think deeply. Another useful skill is recognizing when you need more preparation because not all spontaneous speaking should be completely unplanned. Important presentations, negotiations, interviews, and sensitive conversations deserve thoughtful preparation. Fluency is not refusing preparation, it is preparing intelligently without becoming dependent on exact wording. Identify the purpose, audience, main message, possible questions, and desired outcome. Prepare key phrases and examples, then practice flexible delivery. This creates reliability without memorization. After several rehearsals, reduce notes and vary the wording so your mind learns the idea rather than one script. On the day, trust the structure and respond to the actual situation. Preparation should support presence, not replace it. You should also know when written communication is more appropriate. Some complex or sensitive information may require a follow-up email or document after speaking. Strong communicators use different forms strategically. You can say, "I will send the details in writing so everything is clear." This is not avoiding spoken English. It is choosing the best channel. Fluency includes communication judgment. However, do not use writing to escape every conversation. Use speech for interaction and writing for precision when needed. Balance creates professional strength. Another challenge appears when you speak with authority figures, experts, or people you admire. Their status may make your English feel smaller even though your language has not changed. Remember that the purpose remains communication. Prepare the main point, use respectful language, and focus on the subject. Do not imagine that the other person has never heard imperfect English. Many professionals communicate internationally and value clarity more than accent perfection. Begin simply and allow respect to appear through tone and organization rather than excessive formality. If you do not understand, ask. If you disagree, explain carefully. If you need time, say so. Your right to communicate does not disappear because the listener has more status. Each successful interaction expands your emotional range. You should also practice speaking with people who know you well, because sometimes learners feel greater embarrassment around family, friends, or colleagues who have always known them in another language. They may fear sounding unnatural or being laughed at. Choose supportive people and explain that you are building practice. Begin with short moments rather than suddenly changing every interaction. Accept that it may feel unusual at first. New behavior often feels artificial before it becomes normal. Do not interpret temporary awkwardness as evidence that the practice is wrong. Identity changes can disturb familiar expectations, but consistency creates a new normal. You may also decide that certain relationships or situations are not useful for English practice, and that is acceptable. Choose environments that support the goal. Speaking anytime does not mean forcing English into every interaction. It means having access when you choose or need it. Control, not compulsion, is the goal. As you improve, help other learners without pretending perfection. Share methods, encourage practice, and model recovery. Teaching others reinforces your own identity and reminds you how far you have traveled. However, avoid using comparison to feel superior. Every learner has unseen challenges. A strong speaker remains a learner because language always contains more depth. Humility and confidence can exist together. You can say, "I communicate well and I am still improving." This balanced statement protects both self-respect and growth. The journey does not end when you reach a certain level because environments, goals, and topics continue expanding. What changes is your relationship with difficulty. At the beginning, difficulty makes you question whether you belong. Later, difficulty becomes information about what to train next. You no longer interpret every challenge as failure. This mindset creates lifelong progress. An anytime speaker is not finished. They are adaptable. You must also learn to distinguish productive discomfort from harmful overwhelm. Productive discomfort feels challenging but manageable, while overwhelm causes complete shutdown and repeated negative experience. Choose tasks slightly beyond your current comfort zone. If 5 minutes feels manageable, try 6 or a new topic. If speaking with one person is comfortable, try a small group. Do not jump immediately from solo practice to a high-stakes presentation without preparation and expect the nervous system to adapt calmly. Progressive challenge creates confidence. When overwhelm happens, recover without shame. Reduce the difficulty, rebuild, and return. Stamina training is not proving toughness, it is creating capacity. The same principle applies to feedback. Too much correction during speaking can overwhelm you, while no correction may allow repeated errors to remain. Choose a useful amount and focus. Ask for 1 or 2 patterns after the conversation. Apply them across several sessions. This creates progress without destroying flow. Another key is learning when to let an imperfect sentence go. Not every error deserves attention. If communication succeeded and the mistake is rare, continuing may be the better choice. Save energy for repeated patterns that affect clarity or professionalism. This priority skill becomes increasingly important as your language grows because perfection is impossible and attention is limited. Use attention where it creates the greatest benefit. Your speaking identity becomes stable when you no longer need every conversation to prove progress. Some conversations will be ordinary, and that is a success. Fluent speakers do not celebrate every sentence because using the language has become normal. You may eventually complete a call, meeting, or long discussion and notice nothing dramatic happened. You understood enough, communicated what was needed, corrected a small misunderstanding, and moved on. This ordinary functionality is the dream many learners overlook while chasing a perfect performance. Freedom often feels normal, not cinematic. The language becomes part of the day. That is the destination of speaking stamina. One day the question will no longer be, "Can I speak English for more than 30 seconds?" because you will be focused on whether the idea is useful, whether the story is clear, whether the other person understands, and what the conversation means. English will move from the center of your attention to the background, supporting thought and connection. You may still notice mistakes and continue studying, but the language will no longer feel like a fragile machine that stops after one wrong movement. You will trust it. Trust is the final result of thousands of small experiences, beginning before feeling ready, continuing after hesitation, simplifying difficult thoughts, describing forgotten words, asking questions, listening carefully, and returning after weak days. No single exercise creates this trust. It is built through accumulated evidence. Every chapter of this audiobook has been leading toward that evidence. You learned that your English is not weak simply because it becomes tired, and that speaking stamina can be trained like physical endurance. You learned that translating every thought increases mental load and that smaller direct thoughts create faster communication. You learned that your brain may contain enough English but needs stronger access through retrieval and repeated use. You learned how to move from 1 minute to 3 minutes and then toward longer speaking by expanding, organizing, and connecting ideas. You learned how daily speaking workouts turn passive knowledge into automatic response. You learned how fluent speakers survive blank moments through description, simplification, recovery, clarification, examples, and calm control. Now, the final lesson is that these skills must become part of who you are, not activities you perform only when conditions are perfect. You are not building the ability to complete one recording. You are building a voice that follows you into life. That voice will sometimes be strong and sometimes uncertain, but it will no longer disappear simply because difficulty appears. It will know how to remain. Begin treating every day as an opportunity to strengthen this identity. Speak before you feel completely ready. Use English for one real purpose. Notice one moment worth describing. Ask one genuine question. Explain one idea in greater depth. Recover from one mistake without self-attack. These actions may appear small, but identity is built through repeated behavior. Every time you act like an English speaker, the identity becomes more believable. Eventually, you no longer need to convince yourself. Your life contains enough evidence. You have recordings, conversations, questions, stories, calls, explanations, and problems solved in English. The old statement, "I cannot speak," becomes impossible to believe because reality contradicts it. You may still say, "I need to improve," but improvement is different from inability. A growing speaker is already a speaker. Do not wait until the world gives you a certificate of fluency. Use the language. Do not wait until every sentence appears automatically. Begin with the ones that do. Do not wait until fear disappears. Carry your tools into the fear. Do not wait until you know every word. Describe what you cannot name. Do not wait for the perfect partner, topic, or environment. Create meaningful opportunities with what you have. Do not wait for your future fluent self to arrive and rescue you, because that person is being built by the choices you make today. Every minute you continue after your old limit is a vote for that future identity. Every conversation you enter is a bridge between who you were and who you are becoming. Every mistake you survive removes some of its power. Every recovery proves that communication can continue. Every time you return after disappointment, your discipline becomes stronger than your emotion. There will still be moments when your mind feels empty, but you will no longer interpret emptiness as the end. You will pause, breathe, and choose a direction. There will still be words you cannot remember, but you will describe, simplify, or ask. There will still be conversations that feel difficult, but you will learn from them instead of allowing them to define you. There will still be stronger speakers, but their ability will become evidence of what practice can create rather than evidence against your potential. There will still be more to learn because language is endless, but you will no longer stand outside waiting to become perfect before entering. You are already inside. You are already using the language. You are already building the stamina. The final wall was never 30 seconds. The final wall was the belief that when those 30 seconds ended, you had nothing left. Now you understand that you always have another option. You can add a detail, explain a reason, give an example, compare experiences, tell a story, ask a question, describe a missing word, restart a sentence, summarize the point, or change direction. Your English does not need to die when the first answer is finished because communication is larger than one prepared sentence. Fluency is the ability to keep finding life inside the idea. From this moment, do not count only the words you know, count the moments you remained. Do not measure only your mistakes, measure your recoveries. Do not judge only your speed, notice your control. Do not ask only whether you sounded advanced, ask whether you communicated meaning. Do not compare your voice with someone else's finished performance. Compare it with the silence you have already overcome. The person who once stopped after 30 seconds is not weak. That person simply had not yet learned how to continue. Now you know. You know how to train your mind, how to build access, how to develop ideas, how to organize longer speaking, how to practice daily, and how to recover when everything feels lost. The remaining step is repetition until these skills become character. Speak when the room is quiet and when the environment is imperfect. Speak when you feel confident and when your voice shakes slightly. Speak when the topic is familiar and when you must ask for context. Speak when you have a perfect word and when you need a simple description. Speak when your sentence flows and when you must restart. Speak not because every moment will sound beautiful, but because every real attempt makes your English more available for the next one. Your goal is not endless talking. Your goal is freedom. Freedom to introduce yourself without fear. Freedom to tell your story without translating every thought. Freedom to explain your work, defend your opinion, ask for help, connect with people, and share what matters. Freedom to remain present when the conversation becomes longer than expected. Freedom to be imperfect without becoming silent. Freedom to use the language you have worked so hard to learn. That freedom is built one continued sentence at a time. The next time you reach the old 30-second wall and feel your ideas beginning to disappear, do not say, "This is where my English ends." Say, "This is where my stamina begins." Slow down, return to the main idea, and add one more detail. Then add a reason. Then give an example. Then explain how you felt. Then ask a question. The wall will not fall because you attacked it once. It will fall because you repeatedly continued beyond it until your mind stopped believing it was a wall. 1 minute will become normal. 3 minutes will become comfortable. 10 minutes will become possible. A complete conversation will become ordinary. And eventually you will enter English without checking how long you can survive, because you will no longer feel like you are surviving. You will be communicating. You will be listening, reacting, thinking, smiling, questioning, explaining, and connecting. You will be living inside the language. This is the highest level of speaking stamina, not the ability to talk forever, but the ability to remain available for as long as the moment requires. Sometimes the moment will require one clear sentence. Sometimes it will require a story. Sometimes it will require a difficult explanation, a professional presentation, or a long conversation. Whatever the moment asks, you will trust that you can begin, adapt, and continue. You will not always know the perfect words, but you will know what to do when they do not appear. You will not always feel confident, but you will know how to act before confidence arrives. You will not always understand everything, but you will know how to clarify. You will not always speak without mistakes, but you will know how to protect meaning. This is stronger than perfection, because perfection disappears under pressure, while flexibility survives. Your final transformation is not becoming a person who never struggles. It is becoming a person who is no longer stopped by struggle. That person is not far away. You have already begun becoming them every time you continued reading, listening, practicing, and imagining a stronger voice. Now the audiobook must leave the page and enter your daily life. Choose one topic after this chapter and speak for as long as you can without preparing complete sentences. When your mind becomes empty, use what you have learned. Describe, expand, compare, question, simplify, restart, and continue. Do not stop the recording, because the difficulty is the training. At the end, listen for every moment your English survived. Those moments are the beginning of your new identity. Repeat the exercise tomorrow, not because today was perfect, but because tomorrow's strength is built from today's attempt. Then carry the same courage into one real conversation. Begin before fear finishes speaking. Stay one sentence longer than usual. Ask one more question. Share one more detail. That is how the person who speaks English anytime and anywhere is created. Not through one dramatic leap, but through thousands of moments in which silence was available and you chose expression instead. The world does not need you to sound like everyone else. It needs you to communicate what only you have experienced, learned, imagined, and understood. Your English voice may still be growing, but it already deserves space. Use it, train it, trust it. And when the old fear whispers that your English will disappear after 30 seconds, remember everything you have learned and answer with the calm confidence of someone who no longer believes that lie. Your English is not dying. Your speaking life is only beginning. You have now reached the end of the English-speaking stamina, but the real transformation begins the next time you open your mouth and feel that familiar moment approaching. When the easy sentences are finished, your mind begins searching for the next idea, and the old fear whispers that your English is about to disappear again. In that moment, remember that your mind going blank does not mean you have failed, your vocabulary has vanished, or your dream of fluency is too far away, because it simply means you have reached the exact point where speaking stamina is built, and every time you remain inside English for one more sentence, one more example, one more explanation, or one more question, you are teaching your brain that difficulty no longer has the power to silence you. You began this journey believing that fluent speakers never struggled, never forgot words, and never became tired, but now you understand that real fluency is not the absence of struggle. It is the ability to continue through struggle with enough calmness, flexibility, and confidence to keep the meaning alive. You learned that your English was never truly weak because it had simply not been trained to remain active for long periods, and just as the body becomes stronger through repeated effort, your speaking mind becomes stronger every time you continue after the point where you once stopped. You learned that translating every thought creates unnecessary weight, while thinking through smaller and simpler English ideas allows your mind to move more freely, and you discovered that the words you need are often already inside you, waiting for repeated retrieval to turn slow knowledge into fast and natural access. You learned how to expand one small idea through reasons, examples, stories, comparisons, details, feelings, and reflections, allowing 30 seconds to become 1 minute, 1 minute to become 3, and 3 minutes to grow into conversations that no longer feel impossible. You learned that daily practice matters more than occasional motivation because automatic speaking is not created by one powerful session, but by all the ordinary days when you choose to speak even though nobody is listening, even though your voice feels uncertain, and even though perfection is nowhere to be found. Most importantly, you learned that a blank mind is not the end of communication because you can describe a missing word, simplify a difficult thought, restart a broken sentence, return to the main idea, give an example, ask a question, or create another path toward the meaning. From this moment forward, do not measure your English only by the mistakes you make, the words you forget, or the moments when you hesitate, but measure it by how often you recover, how calmly you continue, and how much longer you can remain inside the language than you could before. Do not wait until you feel completely fluent before you speak, because fluency will not arrive first and then give you permission to use English. Fluency will grow because you repeatedly use English before you feel fully ready. There will still be difficult days when familiar words appear slowly, when your pronunciation feels uncomfortable, or when one conversation does not go the way you hoped. But one difficult moment can never erase the strength you have already built, and one imperfect performance can never define the speaker you are becoming. Your progress will not always be dramatic, because some of the deepest changes will happen quietly as your pauses become shorter, your ideas become more organized, your recovery becomes calmer, and your mind gradually stops escaping into translation every time the conversation becomes challenging. Then one day, without planning it, you will realize that you have been speaking for several minutes without counting the time, without judging every sentence, and without wondering when your English will stop, because you will be too busy expressing a real idea, telling a meaningful story, or connecting with another human being. That moment will not be an accident. It will be the result of every time you practiced when you did not feel motivated, every time you continued after forgetting a word, and every time you refused to let one uncomfortable pause become the end of your voice. So when the next conversation begins, do not place the pressure of perfection on your shoulders, because you do not need to impress anyone with difficult words, unnatural speed, or flawless grammar. You only need to remain present, communicate one clear idea at a time, and trust that another sentence can be built when you need it. When you reach the old 30-second wall, do not become frightened, do not escape into silence, and do not tell yourself that your English has failed, because that wall is no longer the place where your speaking ends. It is the place where your training begins. Add another detail, explain another reason, share another example, and continue for one more moment than your old self believed was possible. That extra moment is not small, because every additional sentence weakens your old limit, strengthens your new identity, and moves you closer to the day when English no longer feels like something you are trying to hold together, but something that naturally carries your thoughts forward. Remember that you do not need every word to express one meaning. You do not need perfect grammar to create understanding, and you do not need to feel fearless before you can speak with courage. You only need to begin, remain, recover, and continue. Thank you for listening to the English Speaking Stamina, published by English Mindset Academy. Carry these lessons beyond this audiobook and into your mornings, your work, your studies, your voice recordings, and your real conversations, because the English you want will not be built only while you listen. It will be built every time you choose to use what you have learned. Your English does not die after 30 seconds. It becomes tired, it searches, it pauses, and then when you have trained it well enough, it rises again and continues. Keep speaking until 1 minute feels easy. Keep training until 10 minutes feels natural, and keep returning until the voice that once disappeared under pressure becomes the voice you can trust anywhere. Because fluency is not about never running out of words. Fluency is knowing that when one word disappears, you will always find another way forward.